Hi, my name is Bob Grinier, and I'm a volunteer with the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project. So welcome to O-Day, Alien Gravity. Welcome this 1st of December 2024. And because we have a scheduling conflict with Ashton Form's stream, I am going to share that in the background. Okay, so bear with me. I'm going to do this. And we'll put some sound on so we can hear ourselves think.
And it's very interesting to see because your platform, Ashton, has been the most open about it.
And I love it. I have plausible deniability. It's like, oh, if I accidentally give away the secret sauce, well, I didn't know. So that's what I love about open source.
You know what makes me laugh? You know what makes me laugh? A lot of this shit is on the web. It's just that's what makes me laugh.
It's considered pseudoscience. It's so shat upon that everybody dismisses it out of hand.
Right.
Oh, speaking of something they're gonna dismiss right out of hand, because remember, Hawking brought to us the whole idea of chronological protection, the idea that you cannot have reverse temporal excursion. Look very carefully at what just said. Time equals, or rather, equals a constant. This constant has a lot to do with breaking the Schwinger limit, but I'm not going to go into it. Too interesting because it speaks to a certain thing. But what I'm about to say now, I hope your followers have not up because they will enjoy this. Given that Hawking said you cannot go back in time, how about that time? Look how simple it is. Time is on the order of 1 divided by frequency. Apply the chain rule to that. You get negative delta t. It's on the order of delta omega divided by omega squared. So in other words, under certain conditions, if I was to say stay in a chamber of a certain ionizing radiation given a certain frequency, so all of a sudden dial up the frequency. Oh, what might happen? Because it speaks to a negative delta t, gentlemen. Reverse temporal excursion.
It might be possible. It might be possible to engineer something where you reverse the entropy, and therefore you get phenomena that nothing in classical physics has been able to explain.
I can live forever.
Simple stuff.
I can live forever.
Simple stuff resulting in a highly complex phenomena. That's all I'm arguing for.
Yeah.
So free energy is real, teleportation's real, orbs that float around freely are real, and also, by the way, guys, you can live forever. So if you need more motivation,
when you say Ashton, when you say free energy, you mean coefficient of performance over 1, like a heat pump in a home.
Yeah, but you know how I talk. It's always going to be free energy and cold fusion and UFOs to me. So if other people want to come up with other fancy terms that's more palatable for normie out there, that's fine. But it's hard.
Let me ask Ashton. Let me ask you. Do you think it's possible to get more energy out than what you put into a system?
100%. Yeah, I think that and yes, we will rewrite the first and second laws, but we're not going to rewrite them out of necessity. We're going to rewrite them out of convenience because it's a matter of once you have this energy source of our UFOs, that is our 0-point energy field that's all around us. If you have an external energy source, you can easily get around the first and second laws. The first law you get around because you're constantly exchanging energy with each other.
If I can leave one last hint, and this is very well, the Meissner effect with superconductors.
Nice.
People don't realize what they're, with respect, I don't mean this towards your audience, I mean towards the mainstream physics world. They don't realize what they're looking at when if you have a liquid nitrogen with a magnet over a superconductor, and that as long as there's constant fuel of liquid nitrogen, the magnet stays levitating. What does that mean in a thermodynamic sense? A lot of people don't realize that. What that's already, it's violating the second law right there, by the way, and I'm just gonna say it. Because fuck it. But people don't realize that.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at something floating freely, like I'm looking at over here on the side of the screen, this is supposedly an LK99, one of the videos of the debunked superconductor. I mean, I'm looking at something just levitating freely here. This is a magnet without it being stuck to anything. It's just not. It's just floating, suspended.
Yep.
And this is why I love the question.
So I noticed in the comments here, I think Bob Greenier said flux pinning. Yeah, right, Bob, flux pinning. But there's a component, a thermodynamic component to the flux pinning that people don't realize is interacting with the local vacuum between its critical state and what's just outside of it. The flux, there's a negative entropy component there that people don't realize.
So just to wind it down, Sal, what would be your final positive message that you would want to leave for people? And thank you very much for having this conversation with me again here today. It's been great.
It's been my pleasure, brothers. Ashton, you coming up to speed, brother. Like, and by the way, hello to Bob, since I heard you over there. So it's like, we definitely should have a foursome sometime. You know, it's like, you know what I mean, like a physics thing. These days you have to say it, you know. But anyway,
yeah.
So look, you and Brother Rossi, it's an absolute pleasure to engage with you on this subject. I've spoken to Brother Rossi many times not to use words like negentropy and other things because it rubs certain people the wrong way. Yeah. Now, eventually, again, people will get used to the terminology and the ideas and so forth, but not right now because they will call us pseudoscientists. So that's what I understand what Brother Ashton is saying. F the mother effers and let's do our thing. The only problem is it's the mother effers that are in power. And they're the ones that get the grants. They're the ones that dispense the favors. They're the ones that give the promotion. Again, we're all effing slaves. The problem is the mofos don't recognize they slaved them. Trust me, it'll hit them one day. They'll be absolutely amazed. Anyway. Awesome. Thanks, Brother Ashton. It's been absolutely a pleasure.
Thank you for having me as well. Thank you, guys. It's an honor. Thank you so much.
Yep, and I want to shoot my big thanks to both Brother Sal and Brother Dave for jumping on with me here today. It really helped ingrain a lot of the scientific concepts that I've learned over the last year. I wouldn't have been able to do any of it without either of these guys that are here. Thank you, MH370X, for following along, guys. I had a great interview. You guys have a great day, and we'll be talking again soon.
Bravo.
Thank you.
Back in the room. How are you doing, guys? I'm going to dial my sound down. It's going to clip out. How's that for you? So, hi, Rotas Gonzalo Chitquio, Alex Lossman. Space Case is in the house. Space Case, look what I have here. Look what I have here. I would have done this today if I hadn't been distracted so much. So, I'm thinking of combining your wonderful wheel within a wheel within a wheel within a wheel, fourth order Tor structure with this little puppy. Yeah? Because it just so happens that the little globe here, this low pressure nitrogen globe or whatever it is, fits rather comfortably in there. And I'm kind of interested to see if I can have it like this and run it and put something on the top to see if it will fly off. I'm not going to do that today. That might have to be for another day because I don't want it to go pop on me on camera. So there we go. Right, so yes, hi M. Kemp, hi Artifact, hi John Watson, Louis Navarro. We have a good quorum here. Hi Tucker Tries, Joseph Kohler. Tammy is in the house. Alex Lozman, EBB. Hi JK Philly fan. You've just come over from your administration role on our friend Ashton's stream there. Thank you very, very much. Yes, plasma toroid experiments. Yes, got to be safe on this, and it's a little bit close to me. I really kind of want to run that. Kind of want to run this when I'm on the other side of the room, preferably behind some kind of polycarbonate. Yeah. Sorry, pencil just went on the ground there. Yeah, Ashton's stream was great. Hi, Crypto Alchemist and Silo. Hi, Miguel OC. Thank you for your contribution there. Okay, so first up, I want to thank all of those who have been very gracious and supported the Kickstarter for making the color version with all of the updated text, corrected English text and bonus materials in this book, which will be remastered into a collector's edition and a digital edition. And if you haven't been able to find time to click on this button yet on the O'Day Alien Gravity, then I would be very appreciative if you could. Even $1 helps move the story forward. So there's that. And other bit of housekeeping. We are going to have a look at this sample from Griffin Laboratories, which is the target for a etheric matter generator, Tesla style, on Tuesday. So possibly as early as Tuesday evening, I will be able to tell you if there was any potentially synthesized elements on here. And wouldn't it be interesting if we had some iron-rich crenellated microspheres? That would be a little too much to ask in this situation, but you never know. So there we go. All very, very exciting. Yes, careful with the address. Did anyone spot the address? It's very small. It's very small. Yeah, I think we're okay. No one looked for the address. Thank you for pointing that out. Right. Good. Excellent. I'm glad I did that. Right. Let me close that one and we'll go here. Now, I've been sharing a couple of videos today because various people have been sharing videos with me and it kind of got in the way of me making my presentation, but that's okay because it's quite interesting what those videos showed in their content. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pump those out first. Thank you very much, Black Tie. That's very kind of you. Wow. 2 super chats already. That really, it is very inspiring. I've just got one comment to make on the cover slide here. There was someone out there that thought that they liked the work that I'd been doing on the cover slides. And they asked me how they were doing it because they were going to be doing some websites or some promotional material coming up. And so what I found was when I was doing some slides like the ESP slide last year, I think it was last year, maybe it was this year, no, maybe it was last year. Anyway, the ESP one, that took me about 5 hours with Photoshop, with some initial ideas and then working on various areas and building it out and doing a little bit of Photoshop work. What I found is that Photoshop is quite tough to get it to do what you want. It often comes up with a message basically saying certain things that you're asking for we can't do. And that's a little bit tedious, and it seems to be getting worse with doing that, and maybe it's just a choice of things that I'm asking it to do, but I didn't think there's anything particularly controversial with what I'm asking for here in terms of, you know, a visual. And so I wanted to have some extra flexibility on X, and so I thought, well, maybe I heard that X can do some image production, and I've been trying for about 2.5 hours to create the image that I wanted for make and break. And I wasn't able to do that. And so I thought, okay, this might be the time to try Grok. And so I put it into Grok, and the same message that I was unable to get any image whatsoever of any useful nature. In each of those 4 images that I've shared recently in Photoshop immediately gave me something that was starting to be workable. Now, the problem with Grok is it gives you a square format image, and that doesn't allow you any flexibility. And if you ask to change it, it just gives you a completely different image. And so that's no good. But if you hit on something that is workable, you can then save that image and then bring it into Photoshop and then use Photoshop's extend tools to actually fill out the rest of the image, and then, you know, use a bit of your, typically Grok gets eyes wrong, quite badly wrong, not terribly wrong. They typically have very small pupils, and you can work either manually in Photoshop or with some other AI selections on those areas and asking it to reimagine them. And so I'm basically doing this as a favor for the person that was asking me how I went about making these recent images. That's how I did it. I used my Photoshop skills. I used my the actual text that I was giving it as the prompt, and Grok in combination, and that's how we got it. Right, okay, so that is that, and I'm going to share these particular images now, these video clips, because I think they're quite pertinent. Now, as you may recall, I have been sharing publicly about my own experiences in 1979 with my father when I was 7 years old, 32 Offington Gardens, Worthing, West Sussex, UK, looking east, late summer night, 4 lights go blip, 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 blip. And my dad says, right, now you can go to bed, kids. And so I've shared this a number of times. And obviously my father, in my view, is not an alien. He was a top tier Mason, Freemason, and he was or had good connections with the UK Navy. And I think we determined that this was controlled and synthesized from the world's oldest air base, purpose-built airport, which was in Shoreham in Sussex in the UK, which is exactly due east from the sunroom in the house where we were shown these things in the sky. Well, today I was sent a video at just gone 4 a.m. Central European time from David Butlier, my friend and colleague in Canada, and he just expressed his complete anger at what was included in this video. I feel a little bit weird about it as well, because you know, back in 2017 into 2018, when I realized that this technology had already been developed, likely in the 1950s, if not before, I had this decision to make, particularly in 2017, as to whether I was going to move forward and work in this field or walk away, because the implications are so profound. And my decision, and I remain firm with that decision, is that the bad guys already have this, or the guys that think they are good enough to keep it from us because we can't play with these toys ourselves. You know, they've already got it, and it's very clear that the tools, various things that it can do, have been used in conflict and other circumstances, in my view, and I was therefore duty bound, morally bound. I was behoven to try and share what I knew, but I knew that it would take many years to get to the point where people would know that they knew that this is how it works. And it's very interesting what the first person says that I was sent today, that David sent me. And it's quite a bit of an emotional ride for me to listen to someone say these same things. Okay, so here we go.
Kept a very low profile for 7 months, but I continued to do my research, and I wrote Dr. Maxfield a letter, and that was perhaps my mistake. I said, look, I've done it. I've figured out the wave equation we were looking for. And again, in my ignorance, I didn't realize how much work had already been done and gone before me. I was just kind of on the periphery or the edge of this whole development.
That's a device to be able to make things like flying saucers fly, is it?
Yes. Also, it's a device to store energy in the form of motion, like of a small star or a big atom. It's called, this is a long word, an MHD plasma, magnetohydrodynamic plasma, like ball lightning, and it contains itself. But it's a way to turn all sorts of electricity into a high voltage battery. Now, this would have been an immediate solution for the Middle East oil blockade at that time. Now, I wrote the letter in good faith, trying to say, look, we can stop the threat of war in the Middle East by using this as an alternate energy source. It's very portable, it's non-polluting. It had some byproduct radiation problems, but things we could solve. It's going to be cleaner than fission or fusion. Now, that's when people here in this country, at the Aeronautical Research Labs, politicians started to get a hold of me. ASIO contacted me. Good grief. An ad infinitum chain of intelligence people, including 2 CIA people from the States. And then the FBI eventually started looking for me in this country, and That again was after the intelligence war over there, after Hoover died. And I was unable to finish my research in this country. In fact, I met many dead ends in government departments and research facilities where they told me privately, like Dr. Tom Keeble in the Aeronautical Research Labs. He told me, yes, we know about the flying saucers your countrymen have built in England and in Canada. And in fact, we have film records of them here in the RAAF files. I said,
I want to stop you there.
yeah.
Are you saying, Stan, that there are such things as, let's call them flying saucers, but they are built on Earth?
Yes, that doesn't mean that I rule out the possibility of other flying devices or intelligent beings visiting the planet either from the oceanic bottoms or deeper areas or from other areas in space. But I am positive that we have the technology, I can even name the companies and people involved, in making high-speed electric aircraft that do look, strange enough, like a saucer.
That video, that's a part of a video published on Eyes on Cinema channel. I give the link on my channel, on my remote view. That was published today, and it's shocking. He's literally saying a kind of exotic vacuum object. Not a sun, it's a small sun, he says, or it's a big atom. So it's like a normal vacuum object, like a sun or an atom, but it's an exotic atom. And in this, you can store incredible amounts of energy. It is magnetohydrodynamic, and the I can't say that word, can I? Can't say that word. It's the alien gravity technology, or in my view, propulsion, that is based on this technology. Totally shocked when I read that or heard that today, this morning. And so I can understand why it was annoying to David as well. So there we go. Absolutely, totally shocking. And it goes on.
I'd like to ask you a direct question. You work in the field of anti-gravitics. Could you make what we call a flying saucer?
Oh, yes, with adequate funds and time, sure. I'd still be doing it for the research organizations if I hadn't differed in philosophy. That's where I got in trouble, because I stood up and said, why are you doing this? And it wasn't for me to know. UFOs, if they don't exist, or these electric flying saucers, if they don't exist in our current technology, I'll give it to the world. I'll be a hero, but I'll tell you right now, I don't need to do that. It's already done.
It's already been done. Funny, because I use those same words in response to something Eric Weinstein said recently. It's already been done. Yep, exactly.
We have theory now, but I don't think any practical devices that would allow us to go faster than the speed of light and traverse many light years of distance in a very, very short time, using the same technique that we used to break the sound barrier, where we warp the shock wave.
Warping, preventing the shock wave, going faster than the speed of light. This is 1977, 2 years. 1977, 2 years before my father showed me these things in the sky over the south of England. And 2 years before A.C. Holt proposed an intergalactic drive system, which categorically is a toroidal moment based system. And for it to have those 6 perfect current loops, they must be plasma loops. They can't be actual physical wires. 2 years before. Later on, as we showed recently, Eric Davis is working with Hal Puthoff and A.C. Holt at NASA. Currently Hal Puthoff is working with a former cold fusion, maybe cold fusion researcher at NASA for US Navy communication systems using a vector and scalar potential based technology, which will be 100% certainly, as it is in his 1993 patent without realizing it, a toroidal moment based system. It goes on.
On tops of the decks of ships that shoot smoke rings or charged particle rings like smoke rings at targets long distances away and strike them with enough force to electrocute or burn the target, depending upon what frequencies are used.
Depending on what frequency you use, you can shock or burn. Exactly what I said Jenna Musa was describing in June 2017 in attacks on ISIS by US military, where she was told over the phone, you've got to put all your electrical items and metals on the ground, otherwise you will burn like ISIS with the electricity bombs. Okay? Toroids of plasma. So I just want to respond to Scoggy Hoggins. I'm going to be talking about that today.
A way to use this process to control minds at a distance of 10 to 15 miles from a central transmitter, where people aren't even aware of it during their sleep. Somewhat like post-hypnotic suggestion. This, in the wrong hands, is not a good tool.
That is the understatement of the century. Of course, this is in Tom Bearden's book as Psychotronic Weapons. Neither he nor Tom Bearden describes how it works. But you have Hal Puthoff handing over the Psychic Spy program in 1992 to Science Applications International Corporation, the pseudo-private entity that you can't do freedom of information on. And then 9 months later, he's applying for a patent which has a toroidal moment in it. I feel weird next to scientific experiments that are using this process. And I later find out, having suggested that it should have a toroidal moment in there and would allow interaction with consciousness, that in Sydney Technical University on June the 15th, 2023, using functional magnetic resonance imaging, they extended the understanding of magnetic loops from the left side to the right side of the brain that existed since 1963 and loops within the brain to absolutely showing that under cognitive tasks in a conscious state, there are magnetic vortices and anti-vortices. This will precisely produce a flux loop which has, through its azimuth, a toroidal moment. Same thing. Okay, the next video is a different video and it's been rebuffed, but there's a counter argument which is a little bit weird.
In natural law, there's only one law, and that's you either know or you don't know. There's no guesswork. It's like, you know when you're hungry, you know when you want to sleep, you know when you want to go to the restroom. These are knowing. These are all natural knowingness. It has a great deal of difference from the synthetic or invented system of guesswork, of belief, if you will. You can believe this, but somebody can come along and get you to disbelieve it, and vice versa. So you go around and around and around all your life sometimes for some people, and never seem to get anywhere until you stand up and look into natural law, which is either you know or you don't know. And if you don't know, then you proceed along a line that's comfortable for you. You proceed into the subject matter that you're studying, and you don't give up until you know what it is. There's no more guesswork. And you don't have to try to do this, because if you're following natural law, it will come to you. All you have to do is start it. The first step is just, I want to learn this. I want to know this. And just start it. And pretty soon, it will start teaching you.
This might look like a radio-controlled bee, but it's actually a bee with a little radar transponder on it, which means that we can track this bee as it flies around the field.
And these little guys can carry 90% of their body weight in pollen.
so it won't affect the way it flies.
I was in physics class, and the teacher was saying, bumblebees can't fly. It's impossible. They can't, aerodynamically, they can't fly. And I was on the second floor of the classroom, and I looked out the window, and there was a big, beautiful bumblebee staring at me right in the eye. And he was standing there doing something that this guy said he couldn't do.
First of all, the bees are flying much faster than predicted, an incredible 30 miles an hour, even when fully laden. The next surprise is where the bees go. They almost always overfly potentially decent food. And once they've found their patch, they then repeatedly shuttle to and from it. And this is the really clever bit. In spite of 30-mile-an-hour crosswinds, whether out or back, they all fly in dead straight lines.
I ran into a person. His name was Arthur Aho. What Aho explained to me was that, and he told me about the Heisenberg principle, that anything you look at, you are vibrating energy. You are radiating out of these eyes, you're radiating energy. You're a live being. And everything you're looking at, you're changing right in front of your eyes. You don't realize it consciously, but that's what's happening. So you're never going to get to the absolute, because the energy it takes to measure something also changes it. So I said, okay, well, what's that got to do with the bumblebee and the teacher? He said, well, he was right. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, he said a bumblebee can't fly aerodynamically. Yeah, and he's right. And I said, well, what did bumblebees do? And they said, well, they levitate. And I said, well, how's that? And he says, come on, I'll show you. And he showed me, he wrote a book, incidentally. I don't know if it's still in print. It's in the Library of Congress. The book is called Tomorrow's Energy Need Not Be Fuel. And in that book, he gave reference to what I'm talking about, that that of levitation, that the bumblebee, when he starts to beat his wings, when he starts to flap his wings, there's a little cavity, a hollow cavity next to the larynx inside his system that's hollow. And when he beats his wings, he starts to resonate this energy, and it goes back and forth, just similar to a guitar strumming on one side of the room and hitting the same chord on the other side of the room, or somebody hitting a high C and breaking a crystal. It's the same thing. It's resonance. And he said, what they do, they resonate. And when they resonate, they eventually reach the resonance of the field around them. And he explained it this way to me, that the Earth was, of course, spinning, but it was operating on a frequency of 8.5 hertz per second or so forth. And he says, once this bumblebee hits that resonant frequency of its surroundings, it becomes a free agent. It creates a magnetic bubble around itself, and it can go anywhere it wants. And I said, well, that's not in any of the science books. He said, I know. You probably never see it there either, but that's what happens. They'll discover it someday and bring it out, but it's just, we have a conventional way of doing things, and then we have a natural way of doing things, and they're totally different. They're diametrically opposed in many, many cases.
The important point here is the bees. As you've heard, the bumblebee shouldn't really be able to fly. Those wings are way too small to lift that chubby little body off the ground. In fact, it's a bit of a conundrum also for the mainstream scientists. They can travel in perfectly straight lines for long distances without any deviation, even during a howling crosswind. Because of the resonant frequencies produced by the vibration of their wings, they create a bubble in the ether, protecting them from any outside interference.
So, there is a counter-argument. The counter-argument does not address the fact that the bees fly in a completely straight line regardless of a 30-mile-an-hour crosswind. They're not affected by the wind. The counter-argument does not address that. And I did my due diligence after I got this video at 4:04, like an hour after or an hour apart from what was sent to me by David Bitlier. By the way, you can see the full transcripts which I've done for all of these videos on the blog for the day. If we go down, where is it? On the end of the B. There's this counter-argument. Of course, it's on a mainstream news outlet. Fact check. False claim that bumblebees use acoustic levitation to move through the air. The claim, bumblebees don't fly but levitate through acoustic levitation. Bees affect the ecosystem through pollination, but some social media users are claiming one type of bee, the bumblebee, has a unique ability, levitation. When they beat their wings very fast, they build up energy inside the hollow cavity near their larynx. When it reaches 7.83 Hertz, matching the Earth's magnetic frequency, they're able to levitate. Reads part of an August the 14th Facebook post that was shared more than 150 times. Oh, the horror! in 2 days. 75 times in 2 days. Shocking. But the claim is baseless. Experts say bees are able to fly because of the flexible structure of their wings and pressure differential between air above and below them, which generates lift. Follow us on Facebook, of course. And here they go. There's a bumblebee, and then that's that. Right, okay, so I'll get rid of that. I would like to share with you my brother's patent here, which, if you go Guy, type this in, Guy, Green resonance engine. Worldwide patent here, valid and current. Let's look at the PDF. Here we go. This is my brother's name, Greenier, Guy Thomas. There we go. My father's name was Charles William Thomas, and my middle name's William. There you go. That's where that comes from. He's not at this address anymore, so I don't mind showing this address. So here we go. He developed this by actually taking a certain type of hoverfly wing off the Arundel River area and placing them on here, and it has these resonant armatures. There's no moving hinges or rotating parts. It just uses resonant sound to move an armature, and there can be many armatures, and by changing the sound that you put in, you can end up by having very many different moves, actuators, different wings, and so on. But what my brother never considered, and which I am going to be sharing at some point, I've done a lot of work on this with regard to Grebenikoffs and the Lytra of beetle wings and so on, is that if you look at a wing under the microscope, okay, so if I'm just going to do some search here, give me a second. So I'm going to do a microscope of, bumblebee wing microscopy, maybe. Let's have a look at that. Images. Right. This is what no one has ever mentioned about this. Not that I found, anyway. They give one particular thing. So let's have a look at a bumblebee wing. This is just an insect. There's a honeybee. Bumblebee wing. Here we go. Bumblebee wing. Let's see whether we can get a decent shot of this. Right. What do you notice on this bumblebee's wing? What do we notice? Can you spot anything? Can you spot anything? I'm going to give this away now for you guys. Hair, yes. Now, the traditional thought about this hair, yes, micro hairs. The traditional thought about this hair is that these are for flow guides. No one has ever said, in my understanding, although someone may have said it, I'm always often not surprised to find out it's already been done. But this is chitin. It's chitin. Chitin is piezoelectric. Boom! Right? So what you have is these hairs, and they go down to a very, 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 very fine point, which gives you static electricity buildup coming down to a point which will produce a space charge arrangement on the end there, and it will then eject static electric clusters. Boom! This is also true of light trap. There's another thing that's going on with bee wing shells, which I will talk about at another time. Now, the irony is these charge cluster emitters here, if we go back to the debunking piece here, which, where is it? The fact check here, which I find is rather hilarious. I actually copied the relevant bit from this because it's right at the end here. It goes, this is a know-it-all traditional person here. Leif Richardson, a conservation biologist who works with the Xerces Society for Invertebrate Conservation, said, oh God, he must know what he does because he's working for these people, so he must know what he does. Richardson said part of the reason bumblebees can fly is leading edge vortices. Leading edge vortices. Vortices. Right? As bees flap their wings, they essentially create a mini air vortex, which Richardson describes as a tiny hurricane. That sits just above and in front of the edge of the wing. It makes it so air is less dense above than below it. A pressure differential that generates lift and allows the bee to fly. Boom! Well, looky there. The divine creator, from alpha repeatedly to omega, comprehends and works with whirlwinds. It's tornadoes. And of course, one wing is going like that, and the other wing's going like that. You have a tornado and an anti-tornado, a tornado and an anti-tornado, a vortex and an anti-vortex, right? What does that give you when you've got a lot of static charge clusters going into the system? Well, wouldn't you know? It would start to form a vortex and an anti-vortex of charge clusters. And you know what? When you have sound and resonant sound in the center of those two things, isn't that a bit like someone emitting charge clusters from their fingers and going, oh, oh. Yes, my friends, the bees meditate. And they fly. Right, I'm going to leave you with the cover art, and I'm going to move on to section 2 of my presentation tonight in a few minutes. Thank you for listening. I'm talking to myself, aren't I? I'm just saying that I was on a yacht in the Thames back in the early 2000s, and I was going through how I feel sad that I wrote a lot of the scenarios that were presented to the DOE and to the DARPA, not DOE, MOD and DARPA for the future of warfare, and how I believe that drones would basically completely disrupt warfare. And my brother's technology was represented as one of 5 technologies of brilliance from the UK. And they had this meeting where there was like, these guys have got 500 kilo drones, these guys have got 50 kilo drones, these ones have got, 25 kilo drones, and these guys over here, they've got 20 milligram drones. And on this yacht in the Thames, we showed these potential investors, and there was 2 general level people, military people there, and they were telling us that, even if you patent this, the military will just use it and they're not going to reward you, and, you're never going to get anything from this. And given the fact that they'd seen it, I'm happy that it's out there in the public space. But we demonstrated this 20 milligram piezoelectric driver motor with the natural bee. It's from a hoverfly. It was from a hoverfly that in the Ada Valley in Sussex, and it's just insane the amount of lift that thing was able to produce. Thank you very much, Kvak. I hope I'm saying your name right. And so what I'm saying is that, in my view, this piezoelectric material of chitin, in combination with the vibration, is producing static electricity that accumulates at the space, forming a high-intensity space charge at the end of the tips of these hairs. That gets emitted, and that results in bulk levels of charge clusters coming out, and those interact with the vortex and the anti-vortex that these people think they know what they're talking about, but they are missing how important that it does produce a vortex and an anti-vortex, or a air vortex and a tiny hurricane in each wing state, and that in itself will create what is said in that video, in my view, which is a bubble in the ether, or therefore a different type of environment. And that allows the miracle that they don't address in this, that the bees can fly. And if we just go to that again and listen to it, it's quite spectacular, really.
In natural law, there's only one law, and that's you either know or you don't know this energy, and it goes back and forth, just similar to a guitar strumming on one side of the room and hitting the same chord on the other side of the room, or somebody hitting a high C and breaking a crystal. It's the same thing. It's resonance. And he said, what they do, they resonate. And when they resonate, they eventually reach the resonance of the field around them. And he explained it this way to me, that the Earth was, of course, spinning, but it was operating on a frequency of 8.5 hertz per second or so forth. And he says, once this bumblebee hits that resonant frequency of its surroundings, it becomes a free agent. It creates a magnetic bubble around itself, and it can go anywhere it wants. And I said, well, that's not in any of the science books. He said, I know. You probably never see it there either, but that's...
Oh, sorry, I missed it.
Being natural. You probably never see it there either, but that's what happens. They'll discover it someday and bring it out, but it's just... we have a conventional way of doing things, and then we have a natural way of doing things, and they're totally different. They're diametrically opposed in many, many cases.
The important point here is the bees. As you've heard, the bumblebee shouldn't really be able to fly. Those wings are way too small to lift that chubby little body off the ground. In fact, it's a bit of a conundrum also for the mainstream scientists. They can travel in perfectly straight lines for long distances without any deviation, even during a howling crosswind. Because of the resonant frequencies produced by the vibration of their wings, they create a bubble in the ether, protecting them from any outside interference.
So you know that this is true when you see the original videos that I took in Suhas Raukar's lab in 2017. When you see the vortex soliton of air bubbles that are produced by sound that have a regular wave function around them and regularly spaced vortices coming in from the backside and folding in. And that regardless of the water movement in the chamber, these solitons, these bubble structures, move in the direction they want to go, So they are impervious to the movement of things around them. They are very good at holding their direction. And I believe that the same thing is occurring with the Bumblebee. And on that note, I'm going to see if I can find Tesla's 1911 statement. Let me have a look for that now. So this is on Tesla Universe. And this was from the Sun, New York Sun here. September the 12th, 1911. Okay? September the 12th, 1911. So planeless, screwless airships safe in any storm. Says his engine could convert factory gases now wasted into prodigious power. Wasted factory gases now wasted into prodigious power for use on land or sea or in the air. Believes he proved it. Anyway, we go down. And we go down. And blah, blah, blah. The new principle is based on these fundamental facts. Hopefully I've got the right. No, it's not that. Hopefully I've got the right one here. Okay, so here we go. How about aerial navigation? Dr. Tesla was asked. He considered for a moment or two and then replied with great deliberation. The application of this principle will give the world a flying machine unlike anything that has ever been suggested before. It will have no planes, no screw propellers or devices of any kind hitherto used. It will be small and compact, excessively swift, and above all, perfectly safe in the greatest storm. It can be built of any size and can carry any weight that may be desired. So it will have no planes, that's like no wings. It has no screw propellers or other means to make it move. It will be small and compact, excessively swift, and above all, perfectly safe in the greatest storm. So it basically doesn't need any wings. It doesn't need an obvious form of propulsion. Excessively swift, and it is regardless of the ambient weather conditions. And it can be built of any size, no limit on the size, and still carry any weight that may be desired. I think that says it all. And this is from September the 12th, 1911, New York Sun. Okay, I've quoted this a number of years ago. Hi, John Coombs. Great to have you here. Right. So, that, I think, does that. And then we go on to our next one here.
Well, what does a physicist and engineer mean by the speed of light? He means this little equation here with the speed of light is given by 1 over the square root of the permittivity times the permeability of the vacuum. So the point is, if you re-engineer those vacuum parameters, then you can make the effective speed of light higher in the engineered region. And so those are the solution in general relativity that are called wormholes. And again, it's not science fiction. This is just right off the shelf standard textbook general relativity applications. So what that means is a reduced time interstellar travel is not, as skeptics would say, you can't get from there to here. Advanced ET civilizations now or ourselves in the future is not fundamentally constrained by physical principles. The exotic physics for such can be addressed in engineering terms, sort of metric engineering, as it were. And that helped us understand some of the aspects. I mean, you may have heard the phrase, dense stars, you get redshift. Well, it turns out in this engineered technology, you get so-called blue shift. That is, frequencies are upshifted to higher frequencies. So, for example, in this room, most of the radiation coming off our bodies, off the walls, and so on, is in fact in the infrared. But we see things in the visible range. But what happens if you get into a volume of space where the vacuum has been engineered in the way I've been discussing? It turns out you get a blue shift. So in fact, the infrared that you don't ordinarily see can get blue shifted up into the visible, so it's not surprising that all these craft should be so luminous. Now, the downside from all of this is the fact that visible light, which doesn't have any particularly harmful effects, gets blue shifted up into the ultraviolet, so you get too close to a landed craft, you might get a sunburn, or off into the soft X-ray region, so the chance of radiation poisoning. So if you run across one of these sitting on the ground, I would recommend you don't, and it's powered up, I'd recommend you don't rush up.
Right, so basically he's saying that it will absorb infrared and it'll push it up into the visible. And the visible might get shifted up into the UV or X-ray. We know that exotic vacuum objects, Ken Shoulders EVOs, can produce up to 2 kiloelectron volt photons, and they emit electrons, so they can be point source, but they also produce UV. There are other people out there that claim their UV is coming from something going on, but what is also true of both the Hutchison effect and what we're going to look at in a minute, the ARV, is that nearby to these devices, the environment was cooler than the ambient temperature at a distance away. And so you could imagine that some infrared energy, the energy from, the environment, was being captured and being shifted to visible, and visible being shifted up to the UV and X-rays as they are spun up. So that's that. Now, I'm going to talk about some of the shenanigans that go on around these things. I have seen it myself. I never set out to look into alien propulsion, but and I'm not talking about the other thing, but we're going to talk about it now in the context of how I thought I might be needing to look at alien propulsion. And so I gave a presentation in Constigliani di Asti in 2016. I'm going to try and find it for you now. I Yeah, right. And excellent. Give me a second. So this was the presentation here.
Using the
I've got adverts going on there, so we'll wait until those clear. And I gave the presentation on the 16th of maybe. No, it was published then, but I actually presented it on the 6th of June, I think. 9th of June. Here we go. So it was presented on the 9th of June, 2017. And it was in the graveyard shift. And this was the first presentation that I had used the symbol of God-controlled power. Okay. This is the first time I used any symbol in my work. And this was because I saw this on the order of electrical engineers with this outer darkness cometh light underneath. And I correlated that to this Sumerian stele. Okay. Why am I showing you this? Why are you showing me this, Bob? On that same morning, I was working in the foyer of the hotel where the conference was. And these people came in and suggested, basically, as far as I understand it, they work for the intelligence services. It was about 3 a.m. in the morning. I was working on my presentation. I was put on the graveyard shift, so I just thought I'd work through. And this person was extremely drunk. And they sat down next to me, and completely out of the blue, they said, they talked at me for 2 hours. But during the course of this conversation, completely out of the blue, they said, look, Bob, my friends, I'm not going to play drunk. Look, Bob, my friends have seen the US anti-gravity craft. They're real, but just don't talk about them. And I'm thinking, hold on a minute. I've never said anything about anti-gravity. So that was a bit weird. And then I'm going to find out something else now, just quickly. Two years later was ICCF 21 at Fort Collins, Colorado, USA, 3rd to the 8th of June, 2018. Okay, there we go. And I turned up out of the blue here with Alexander Parkhomov's data to present from his longest running, amazing, massive amounts of energy producing low energy nuclear reactions reactor. And people asked me, are you going to present? Are you going to present? I said, I don't know, because I didn't even think I was coming, but I'm here. And I put the feelers out to find out whether, because several people told me there's some people that hadn't turned up and there are some slots free. And so I said, okay, well, can we find out if I can have a slot to present Alexander Parkhomov's work? And the message came back to me that, sorry, there actually aren't any slots free. It turns out that in between there being slots free and then being no slots free, my friend Dr. George Eagley had been asked to present old material, old presentations that he had already presented before. And this was slotted in to fill those empty slots. And the really weird thing was, much later down the line, I was told that the organising committee had decided that they weren't going to give those slots to me because they worried I was going to talk about anti-gravity, even though I was talking only about Parkhomov's data. So here we go. 2 years apart, I have people saying, oh, you're going to be talking about anti-gravity. Don't talk about anti-gravity. All I can conclude is that They were reading my Gmail. That's all I can conclude. Well, later I got an email, and this was on Tuesday, the 11th of October, 2022. And the email said, I note this because given my background, I expect what you are thinking about. I expect that what you are thinking about, the role of gravity and the unification of the forces, will almost certainly attract attack. If you did write a review, you could include the experimental observations and either leave out or label as possibilities the theoretical ideas. So this is kind of friendly advice to say, look, you know, if you're going to talk about unification of the forces and gravity, you're going to be probably getting under attack. So just don't talk about those things. Just show the observations. Just show the observations. Leave those bits over there. Just show the observations. Or you're going to might invite attack, or you might attract attack. Now, attract attack can mean a lot of different things. Okay, so here we have 2016, 2018, 2022. People telling me, watch what you say. Watch what you say. So, what could possibly allow for energy and condensation, unification of the forces, and you know, something that would provide for alien propulsion? I don't know. But someone who probably did know or had a reasonably good understanding was one Mark McCandlish. And I don't have a copy of this that is better than this, but I do have this, which has just disappeared. So I'm going to go back, that one. And we can look through some of the aspects on here. But before I do that, I want to talk to you about what happened to Mark McCandlish. And I have a document for that, and we are going to read through that because it's going to be in context. Okay? So there's several emails that were sent out to a group of people. This was October the 28th, 2020 at 4:19 a.m. Greetings all. Shortly after I became one of the witnesses in Dr. Stephen Greer's disclosure project and appeared in the May 2001 press briefing at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., Dr. Greer had me interact with another potential witness who claimed that his mother had worked at Lockheed's gunworks in the 1960s. Okay. Now, before we go into this, you're going, Bob, aren't you a little bit off track here? Is this really what, you know, is something to do with the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project? Well, I'm going to remind you of Christopher P. Tinsley's interview with Martin Fleischmann with Martin Fleischmann. Let me just get that for you. This is on Infinite Energy's site, and I've referred to this in the past. It's a little bit hard to read. Let's see if we can zoom in. And the interesting part is on, I think, page 2. So we'll go through this. He actually talks about something that is like J radiation. J radiation is these energy clusters, in my view, that come out. And I agree with Shishkin on that point of view. And this will relate to the homopolar generator in the ARV. And we'll come to that in a little while. Okay, so I need to search for the word I'm not allowed to say. Here we go. So Mr. Tinsley says, are you interested in any other, shall we say, controversial ideas, areas of science at all? Are there any things which most people would perhaps dismiss, but perhaps you have a less certain view? Fleischman, yes. Well, cold fusion is part of a much wider area, and I have been really quite uncertain that our theory and understanding of condensed matter is at all satisfactory. However, I'm not interested in some of the more extreme ideas which have been put forward and which interests you, you know, in the future of energy. I will say, this is Christopher P. Tinsley, I will say that some of this gravity modification stuff does, in fact, appear to have a theoretical basis as well as some experimental evidence. ... Fleischman, well, if you think about gravitation, until we have a unified field theory, so here we've got my warning in 2022, do not talk about gravity or unification of the forces. Do not talk about gravity. Do not talk about this in your papers. Just talk about what you observe. Then you can't be sure what's going to happen. Tinsley, even Frank Close said that we don't know much about gravity and anything might happen. Fleischman, we really have an incomplete understanding. This will change, but there are one or two notable exceptions, which I don't want to talk about now. We have no understanding of quantum gravity, and until that happens, we can't be sure that nature won't play some rather strange tricks. As I told you, when we were talking before, we had about 4 projects which we were working towards. One was to do with gravitation. Yes. One of the 4 projects that Martin Fleischman was working on was to do with gravitation. One was actually to do with behavior of electrons in metals. Maybe we'll talk about that. We actually started to collect equipment together to investigate the behavior of electrons in metals. But, ... Fleischman, I have told you there have been certain themes which have run through my work, although they have never really been disclosed. I have often worked on topics where something short of a final answer would nevertheless be quite interesting. Now, in this whole 3-page recounting of this interview, the only time where it says Fleischman and Fleischman next to each other is this cut phrase here, which you don't know how long this is lasting. You just don't know how long this conversation is going on here. But it was instigated by gravity, which he didn't want to talk about now. But he was working on it. There we go. Back to our friend and dearly departed Mark McCandish. And had been a part of the program that developed the so-called alien reproduction vehicle. What? This potential witness had been part of the program that developed the so-called alien reproduction vehicle. So it's definitely been invented by man. Is it really an alien reproduction vehicle or just called that? Which I have spent the better part of 30 years since 1988 investigating. This witness claimed that his mother had been a team member of the group within Skunkworks that had built the ARV, right? So there we go. Lockheed Martin, Skunkworks. One of the things he disclosed during my interview with him was that the dielectric material used in the large capacitor array on the bottom of the ARV was Herkimer quartz diamond. So Herkimer quartz diamond is double terminated quartz that comes from the upper New York state. It isn't a diamond at all. It's just quartz, and it melts around about the same normal temperature as fused quartz. This may provide a tie-in with UFO sightings over areas known to be rich in Herkimer quartz diamond material. Well, the UFO sightings over well-known areas of no. They would be charge clusters being produced and being projected in the sky, and maybe some electromagnetic waves being produced by the quartz and being emitted into the sky, and field interference, just as it probably is in Hessdalen. So I think there's a bit of confusion here between Herkimer quartz diamond being useful for producing the effect and natural mineral Herkimer quartz diamond producing natural ball lightning. As an interesting aside, the capacitor plates in each of the 48 capacitor sections, boom, I rest my case, are made up of magnesium zinc foil laminate in a ratio of 95% to 5%. Magnesium zinc foil laminate in a ratio of 95 to 5%. So magnesium is the lightest structural alloy. The lightest structural alloy. It is also the lightest, no, it's not quite the lightest, one of the three elements that Tesla used to make his etheric matter rays. He used beryllium, magnesium, and aluminium. And bonded by running the foil through a molten bath of bismuth. Well, there we go. We have magnesium and zinc with lots of magnesium and only 5%, and bonded by running the foil through a molten bath of bismuth. Bismuth is the most diamagnetic element, natural element in natural state. Yes, better known as Arts Parts Acker Dow Chemical Co's AZ31X. So they are saying that the thing that is being looked at as a means by which it can do waveguides by Hal Puthoff, the Arts Parts thing, is in fact part of the capacitor arrays in one of these devices. The final half-inch thick plates are then clad in a thin copper alloy sheeting. However, the slumping temperature of Herkimer quartz diamond is something around 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit, and copper has a melting temperature of around 1,984 degrees Fahrenheit, hundreds of degrees below that of Herkimer quartz diamond melting point. This means that in order to mold the capacitor array, the alternating 4 positive and 4 negative plates in each of the 48 sections. Right, so you have 4 positive and 4 negative plates. As I said previously, there are 8 electrodes in there. They have 4 positive and 4 negative plates. In each of the 48 sections of the capacitor array must be assembled as solid wedges that are precisely cut to size and clustered in a heating mold in order to fuse them at absolute minimum level of applied heat. Well, actually, you can create quartz, even double-ended quartz, by a kind of like hot steam process and growing the crystals. And there are videos out there of this being conducted in Japan, I think. This also helps to assure the absolute minimum number of contaminants or occlusions within the dielectric material and yields a product superior to that of any method attempting to pour molten quartz into a mold holding 384 plate components. I speculate that the plates are clad in copper for the simple reason that magnesium zinc foil would ignite around 628 degrees centigrade or 1,164 degrees Fahrenheit. One of my sources indicated that only after charging the array to a level higher than 1.25 million volts will mere levitation with the bifield Brown effect become a true system of mass modification, mass neutralization, enabling superluminal faster than light travel at warp capable speeds. Enabling superluminal faster than light travel warp capable speeds in the ARV. Flight control was achieved by biasing the amount of voltage in each section, thus creating a refined method of thrust control, not unlike the swash plate of the main rotor of a typical helicopter. So I described this before. You have a ball, and under the ball there is a cup, and the cup, if the whole UFO moves that way, this will slip down under gravity, and it will then phase the capacitor array so that then it'll do more on the toroidal subtoroidal structure here, which will then push it up because the gravitational vector through the center of the azimuth will change, and it'll keep it level with respect to gravity. If you force this in a particular direction, then it's going to move in a particular direction. Okay? So it's about like, do you have your mouse go up to go up, or do you have your mouse go up to go down? That'll make sense to some people. Okay. It might be changing the volts, which is kind of basically the same thing. Yes, Mick says maybe the frequency and not the volts, or maybe the volts and not the frequency. Possibly just the volts, because that's accelerating charges. The interesting thing about 1.25 million volts is that you actually need about 1 inch thick on the Herkimer quartz, something like that. I think 1.02, I did the calculation the other day. Where is it? Somewhere here. I've got a calculation. It's not so hard to do. I've done it several times. I keep losing it. Somewhere here. I'll search for Herkimer. Right, so if we wanted to polarize the physical vacuum, we need twice the mass of an electron, which is 511 kiloelectron volts, which means we need 1022 kiloelectron volts. So the dielectric constant of air is 500 kilovolts per centimeter, which means you need 2.044 centimeters or 0.805 inches of the Herkimer quartz in order to keep those plates from discharging. So I would think that this 1.25 million volts here would be more than sufficient to polarize the vacuum. Okay. Right. And then, so this was on October the 28th, 2020. So there's incredible details in here. Right. This was on Thursday, March the 11th, 2021 at 5:27 a.m. Greetings to the group. I first described the parallel plate configuration of capacitors used in the asymmetrical capacitor array propulsion system of the so-called flux liner or alien reproduction vehicle over 30 years ago, based on eyewitness and whistleblower testimony. No one took me seriously. I take you seriously, and I'm sorry, Mark, I never got to talk to you about it. The metamaterial dielectric was doped. Herkimer quartz diamond, found mined in upstate New York, I believe. The quartz was doped with heavy metal powder, something with big atomic number like depleted uranium. The quartz was doped with a heavy metal powder, something with a big atomic, but he doesn't know, but maybe it was that. I don't know. He says it's doped with it. The witness stated that the higher mass of the doping material, the more efficient the capacitor array's performance would be. Okay. I would suggest probably something like tungsten. It is heavy. It's not as heavy as uranium, but it's easier to come by. And tungsten has this high conductivity. Maybe that's not a good thing to put in there. I don't know, but any metal is going to have something like that going on. Right. The capacitor plates were foil laminations layers of Dow Chemical Co. magnesium zinc alloy AZ31-X 95% to 5% magnesium to zinc respectively, with bismuth used as a binding material. The foil sheets were run through molten bismuth bath, then brought together several layers at a time, running through precision rollers that would squeeze the excess bismuth out, dropping it back into the bath. So this explains your so-called arts parts piece. Once allowed to cool, the magnesium zinc bismuth laminated product was clad or sealed in a thick copper foil. The circular capacitor array was constructed of precision cut and polished, occlusion-free wedges of Herkimer quartz diamond, assembled in a large circular mold, then slowly brought up at the melting temperature of Herkimer quartz diamond, somewhere around 1500 to 1700 degrees C. I think it's just over 1700 degrees C, but it might become soft at somewhere below that. When all components fused together in a controlled environment that was oxygen-free and backfilled with inert gas such as argon or nitrogen. Then, just as in the construction of the Mount Palomar Observatory's 200-inch mirror, the array was brought back down to room temperature very slowly, over the course of perhaps as much as a year, so as not to allow fracturing or warpage. So they really want these things very precise. Historically, the ARV Fluxliner and craft of similar designs were seen as far back as the 1950s. Well, they certainly look like something like that. Although one was first photographed at close range from a military C-47 flying at altitude near Provo, Utah in 1966 or 1967. The eyewitness whom I spoke with described seeing 3 of these type aircraft in the Lockheed Gunworks hangar at Palmdale, California, November the 12th, 1988, while in the company of a high-level Lockheed Martin executive. The diameter of those 3 different craft, all of the same general design, were approximately 24 feet, 60 feet, and 120 feet in diameter. This is very much in line with what was being said by Nikola Tesla. You can make these, of any size, but, they need to go to the same kind of, principle. So one might guess that the propulsion technology involved is scalable, or as we might like to say here, scale invariant. Okay? Right. Scalable. What's going on here? No. Where were we? Where's the scalable line? Scalable, there we go. Okay, so we go here. Right, the witness described a presentation in that exhibit that was given by 3-star Air Force general, who was quoted as saying that the Fluxliner was capable of doing light speed or better. So it was the 3-star Air Force general that claimed it could do light speed or better. Right. On the following day, just past midnight, on the 12th of March 2021, I think this is Paul Morad. The specifics of heavy metal doping in dielectric material of the ARV capacitor array came several years after the initial disclosure to me. I would have to say around 1998 or thereabouts. It seemed too much like of a technical point for most public audiences, since I have often found that when retelling the sequence of events, audiences tend to have their eyes glazing over when I get to the technical details, an unfortunate condition of the public's general lack of scientific understanding or even an interest in the same. I'm usually approached after my few speaking engagements by the more technically oriented members of the audience and peppered with a barrage of questions about such things. Those discussions make the entire endeavor worthwhile, and I have evolved into a number of number of lasting friendships. So this is on Friday, the 12th of March, and he's talking about his love, effectively, of a number of lasting friendships. He appreciates the friendships that come out of technical discussions. In response to the enlightening comments by this person here, I thank you, this person. And I must add that one of the effects I heard about in researching this vehicle design, related patents and so forth, was that charge accumulation in the wedge-shaped plates starts at the corners. Well, it would do. Mostly at the very pointed inner ends, where the actual size of the plate area when compared to the dielectric spacing is proportionally much greater than at the other ends. The completed plate assemblies in the 20-foot diameter ARV craft were 1/2 an inch thick. 1/2 an inch thick. So that does limit us. 0.805 is what we need to get to 1.022 kilo electron volts. while the dielectric material on all sides of each plate was at least 3/4 of an inch. At least 3/4 of an inch. So we're saying we need 0.805 inches to give us 1.02 kilo electron volts to polarize the physical vacuum, or rather to, polarize the quantum foam. And he is saying at least 0.75. Okay, at least 3/4 of an inch. So there we go. I think it's going to probably be at least 0.805 of an inch. I'm not certain that means anything. I'm certain it means something. I'm pretty certain it means something. But the outer edge of the capacitor section was shaved at about 33 to 35 degree angle and highly polished. It was my understanding from the eyewitness that all 4 of the negative cap plates and all 4 of the positive plates were tied together, with one connection to the system at the inner ends of each stack of plates, 4 stacks in all. 48 stacks in all. Okay. That number 48 leads to some interesting conjecture. I've never actually read this, so it's been interesting to see. Noting that there are quite a few numbers 48 can be divided by, suggesting that there might be overlapping sequences of plate charging in groups of 2, 3, 4, 8, 12 or 24 units stacked capacitors per cycle. I think he might be correct. I think depending on how intense you want the gravitational beam to go through the center is how many vortice structures you want going around on the outside. If you grouped 12, you would have 3 in a group, wouldn't you? 4 rather. You would have 4. 24, you would only have 2, wouldn't you? That is very fascinating. I don't think you're speculating. I think that was brilliant insight, Mark McCandlish. I'm sorry I never got to discuss this with you. It is now thought that the cylinders below the flywheel or homopolar generator, right? Well, it's a homopolar generator if it has an intense magnetic field in order to be a homopolar generator. But it could be a flywheel and it could be something more interesting. That is to say, it's a spinning piece of metal, okay? And we're going to go and look at Alexander Shishkin's work, okay? I have permission to translate this from Alexander Shishkin's work. If I haven't already translated it, I might have done, but I need to look at it again. But if I haven't done, we're going to look at that now. I'm just going to note it down so I don't forget. Where are we? Where's my paper? Okay, let me note that down. Very, very important, because we already had an early question on getting an answer on this. And so it's one of the main things that I want to share with you today that I don't think anyone that has looked at this has ever been able to consider. At the center of the central column may actually be electromagnetic coils rather than additional oxygen tanks, as the original eyewitness believed. Pulsed input to these coils would drive the disk, which may have several overlapping functions. I welcome comments, positive or negative, pun intended, and I'll do my best to answer questions, time permitting. Right, and this was a few minutes later, regarding the voltages and the end result of mass modification or inertial dampening, the witness stated that beyond the Byfield-Brown effect, mass nullification and inertial dampening starts at about 2.5 million volts. He made the distinction between the two. Well, if that's the case, you don't have enough in air, and if you went up in the atmosphere, you don't have enough dielectric barrier in the quartz to prevent arcing with the 2.5 million volts. So maybe it's phasing it around. I don't know. It's just that looks a little bit unnecessary to me. I don't think that's necessary. Friday the 12th of March 2021. This is shortly afterwards. He's got another point here. One last point before I head off to work. So this is a man that is going to work. He's quite excited about sharing this information, but he wants to get this out before he goes to work. The witness stated that the entire craft, at least the part that he could see, was covered by a thick resin-like coating that was and had what appeared to be fine metallic particles suspended inside of it, kind of like an exaggerated metal flake paint job on a custom car. Thick resin-like coating. Well, I would suggest initially that this is to stop the 2 to 10 kilo electron volt beta particles that come out of your macro exotic vacuum object that you're building around the craft. It might stop the soft X-rays as well. These soft X-rays are up to 2 kilo electron volts. When the structures blow up, they produce up to 10 kilo electron volts. So, you know, you're going to need some protection. But now that we know what Shishkin is talking about, the resin-like coating could be something where you have the silver and strontium aluminate or something in there to prevent strange radiation from coming into the device. Certainly, if I was to build an ARV using a steam engine and a very steampunked version, I would definitely want my device to have protection from strange radiation. I wouldn't want to be sitting in this thing without that. Okay, so moving on. I think we have, is that it? That is it. So the last message here was on Friday the 12th of March 2021 at 00:23, and he's heading off to work. So he likes his friends. He's, you know, heading off to work. So there we go. This is not a person who I would think would be having issues. Now, this is where it gets a little bit interesting and very sad, because the story is that I'm just checking I haven't got any other emails from him. Okay. Okay, give me a second. Okay, so Mark McCandlish died, according to the coroner, by suicide on April the 13th. That was 1 month and 1 day after the fairly congenial message sent here. 2021 in Redding, California. This was by gunshot wound to the head from a handgun. There were reports and discussions within various communities suggesting that his death might have been suspicious or forced, but these are based on speculation and conspiracy theories rather than definitive evidence. The coroner's report confirmed the cause of death, i.e. a gunshot to the head, refuting internet rumors of it being from a shotgun. So it was a handgun to the head. Very sorry. However, it's worth mentioning that due to his involvement in sensitive topics like UFOs, advanced propulsion systems, and his whistleblowing activities, some individuals and groups have questioned the circumstances surrounding his death, suggesting it might have been a cover for more sinister actions. These theories, while not supported by official reports, contribute to the ongoing debate about secrecy and the potential dangers faced by those revealing classified information. I was led to believe he was 1 month or 2 months away from giving a testimony to Congress. There's a comment here that says, according to various sources and discussions within the UFO and whistleblower communities, there were claims that Mark McCandlish was scheduled to testify before a US Senate meeting on UFOs, UAPs. However, these claims largely come from alternative media and community sources. There is no definitive official documentation from Congress or from government that confirms Mark McCandlish had a confirmed scheduled appearance before Congress at the time of his death. The information primarily existed in the realm of public speculation within niche communities interested in UFO disclosure. I do not see in his writing here a man that is tormented. Very matter of fact, enjoying talking to colleagues about specifics and being very specific and talking about friendships with people that are interested in talking about these things, and just a month and 1 day. Okay. Sadly, he's not the only one. There is also the tragic tale of Amy Eskridge. So, on April, what did I say? April the 13th, 2021, 1 month and 1 day after Mark McCandlish wrote this last email. On May the 17th, 2022, so that's a year and a month afterwards, Amy Eskridge wrote, for your information, the dominoes for the next wave of McCandlishes are currently being set up right now. I'd be absolutely shocked if no one other than me on this email chain has seen it occurring in your own lives over the past month or so. I won't read the whole thing, but she basically says that there was another person that she went out to visit, and they were dead. And she also says something which, you know, is kind of something that people say. If anyone reports that I killed myself, I most certainly did not. If anyone reports that I overdosed myself, I most certainly and absolutely did not. If anyone reports that I hurt anyone else, I most certainly and absolutely did not. Just like McCandlish most certainly absolutely did not blow out his own head off with his own shotgun. Okay, she's saying shotgun, but the coroner said it was a handgun. I think we all know that, and neither did I. The creepiest things that I've ever seen, it's a bit rude, thank you, Darren, that I've ever seen occurred since February of this year, and it's saying a lot because I've survived some super ridiculous, creepy stuff over the past 4 years. That was the last email she sent to the community on May the 17th, 2022. She was apparently taking some pain relief medication for a condition which had certain side effects. And she'd stopped taking this medication 2 days, apparently before she was found dead, having shot herself with a handgun. However, whilst that was the last one she sent to the community, she sent me an email on Tuesday the 19th of May. It's a personal email, and I won't go too much into it. But and yeah, I'm going to read a part which is relating to a father who worked at NASA on alien gravity research. And yeah, alien gravity is much of the problem here for us as well, I think. My dad often says that discovering anti-gravity ruined his life. Yep, it sort of did. What we have is not true anti-gravity, but accomplishes many of the same goals. It was recently published as a NASA technical memorandum that was disassociated from his name in the search engine to make it especially hard to find. And I have the link. I'm going to share it with you. This has brought all kinds of trouble down on our heads. The data cited in this paper was only the first set of preliminary data that was done at NASA. We continued the work privately after that and ended up getting a 4% weight change bidirectionally, and with the ability to either increase or decrease the perceived weight depending on the orientation of the device, as this is an orientational force that is produced. For me, anyone who talks only about weight reduction in regards to AG clearly does not have a real theory. If your theory and math is correct, the force produced is easily seen to be bidirectional. And you'll see this in the same work, similar work by Zatelepin and Baronoff from 2018. Just like all other real effects that are bidirectional. If you can reduce the weight of something, you should also be able to make it heavier as well, as we did. The process of writing this paper was an absolute nightmare. Even though it was our oldest and earliest form of the work, as we were writing it, I was told by multiple parties that I had better not publish that. Sounds familiar? But on the other hand, I also had someone tell me in person that his group had surveilled it and that they wanted it to be put out there. He explained to me in detail how our prototype worked, just to prove that he actually had the surveillance. Then he gave me an ultimatum of a 6-month deadline and said we could either publish it within that span of time or his group would publish it themselves under a different name and take all the IP and all the credit. This conversation included him intel bombing the absolute crap out of me, including quoting to me obscure stuff about my childhood and telling me that I had something between my L3 and L4 that I needed to have checked out. I pulled my old MRI records out after that conversation, and he was right. There was something between my L3 and L4 in the original radiology notes that my doctors had never mentioned to me. Smart of you to avoid credit cards and social media to avoid tracking. She's talking about my conversations with her. That these people have demonstrated to me their information goes much deeper than that. Even having access to my extensive medical records and quoting scientific ideas out of ours to me that we had only ever discussed privately in our home lab and had never emailed or talked about over the phone. Okay. There was some statements that she was being paranoid. There were some statements that because she hadn't taken her medication for 2 days, that's why she is claimed to have taken her own life. And I'm sorry to the father. No one should lose their own child. I know, because personal situations, and no one should lose their own child. And I'm sorry for your loss. The stuff that's going on right now is by far the worst it's ever been. Perhaps because I've advanced my theory again pretty significantly. What a nightmare. She died less than 3 weeks after that. 2 to 3 weeks after that. So, this is her paper with her father, which shows the early work that was done at NASA, which they extended, and she extended even further before she decided she was going to end her life, according to the official records. A study of the Pope Osborne angular momentum synthesis theory poems, including mathematical reformulation and validation experiment. Richard H. Estridge, retired, M.A. Nelson, and M.P. Schoenfeld, Marshall Space Flight Center at Huntsville, Alabama. I won't read through all of this, but you can go and look at it. I will give the link. You can see some pictures. It's a physical mock-up spinning things. So it's quite similar to the work of Baranov and Zatelepin. So they've got a particle with a particular mass, and that particular mass is also spinning. So it's spinning around and spinning around. It's a spinning mass traveling in a circular orbit. So, you know, you can imagine that if you're trying to build this out of actual physical things, it's going to be hard, right? But if you made it electrodynamically, it's going to be a little bit easier. Anyway, you can see the things, various mock-ups here. This is real research here. So you've got a spinning gyro here, and that spinning gyro is being spun. Okay. Again, another mock-up, spinning gyro being spun. Another one here in a controlled cavity. There's the mock-up there. That's the specifics for the gyro. Richard H. Eskridge. Joining MSFC in 1983, Richard H. Eskridge has been involved in many projects, including laser propulsion, rocket plume diagnostics, combustion physics, fusion propulsion, electric gun development, and many different varieties of advanced propulsion studies. As the chief engineer of the MSFC Combustion Physics Laboratory for many years, he led efforts in the MSFC to test area for rocket engine diagnostics for SSME, solid rocket engines, rocket engine injectors, diagnostics, and real-time leak detection of cryogenic systems. He joined the MSFC Propulsion Research and Development Center in 2002 as chief engineer for fusion propulsion experimentation, where he built pulsed power capability MSFC. In the MSFC Pulsed Power Electrical Propulsion Laboratory, Eskridge developed electric guns for impact studies, including a unique exploding wire gun. And plasma-driven micrometeorite gun. He holds a patent for novel electrical propulsion system called the PT-1, which propels a spacecraft by ejecting high-speed plasmoids. Plasmoids. He also reached the anomalous gravitational effects of electrically pulsed superconductors. In 2012, he became the lead technical advisor for the MSFC Propulsion Research and Development Center before retiring in 2016 after 33 years at NASA. Eskridge completed this study for the Pope-Osborne theory and the derivation of the spin-coupled force. He holds a patent for novel electrical propulsion system called the PT-1, which propels a spacecraft by ejecting high-speed plasmoids. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break and I'm going to come back with the next part of my talk, which is going to have a boom at the beginning of it. God bless you, Amy Eskridge, Mark McCandlish. Yeah, I'll give you a link to the paper. Give me a sec. How do I do that? I will make a very easy link. Let me do that. I'm going to make a very easy link to share. Just going to check that you can link to this automatically. Let's see if this works. Okay. Get yourself ready. I have got a QR code, or you can type in the quick reference code I've got here for you. It's Mark McCandish's ARV graphic there. I don't have a better version of that, but we'll look at the other one. This is the QR code, so you can go and get the link there. And this is a quick link I have for you. Okay. In fact, I have the specific links here. Richard Eskridge at NASA. He was working on particle weapons and propulsion systems, specifically plasmoids. What are the chances? Okay. I'm going to find one paper whilst you're maybe noodling at that presentation, and I'm going to see if I can get it from my blog. Bear with me. Yeah, that didn't do what I wanted to do. Oh, that's because I'm in the wrong place. Not that one. Okay. If you see if I can find it a different way. This is going to be important and it's going to be unique. I've been wanting to say this for a few years. Okay, here we go. We got it. I want to get it to translate into English. English, there we go. Okay. Okay. So first we'll have a look at the ARV diagram here. It's not great quality, but it is better than nothing. Okay. So here is McCandish's drawing. I think this has got a summary of some of the things that are on there. So here we go. Adjacent sections are stacked in laterally opposed order. Okay. So I guess that means that the distance between these two plates is the same as the distance between the plates vertically. And that's probably how you would achieve it. And it also might allow for field to go in a sort of diagonal way. If you were phasing up here, then it would pick up here and then it would phase up here. Okay, if you wanted to do that kind of thing. It might be relevant for when you're grouping these. Okay. Here we go. Capacitor charged to 1 million volts will probably cause vehicle to hover. Stress energy tensor of high voltage charge creates an envelope of 0G, 0 mass, which craft floats in. Bit like our Bumblebee. But the Bumblebee doesn't have 1 million volts unless it's very good at making charge clusters that break up and they have, or rather the charge clusters emit 2 killer electron volts. That's not going to do it. Still, I just don't think this is necessary. I think you can do it for less. But maybe with this device. 0 mass, which craft floats in. Directional changes are achieved by varying charge level in the 48 capacitor sections. So there we go. You vary the charge level in here, so you're not necessarily phasing them, you're just changing the charge intensity, which may do it. Yeah, that's directional. Yeah, okay, so depending on the speed, I guess, it depends on your velocity or maybe your voltage, but if you vary the voltage in one, that'll change your direction. So more voltage probably pushes you in a particular direction, and more voltage on a particular one does your vectoring. Really rather simple. Capacitor section is total thickness is 12 to 14 inches. 20-foot 5 diameter, 18 layers of 0.5 copper wedges, 7.5 inch in arc width. Okay, 7.5 inch in arc width gives you 48. I know that for a fact because I've built so many fractal toroidal geometry structures. Embedded in greenish glass or plastic spaced at about 0.75 of an inch. Okay, so he said it's at least 0.75 of an inch, and we worked out it needs to be 0.805 to polarize the quantum fluctuations. A total of 48 sections. Okay. Electromagnetic force coating is only used at fairing for crew compartment. Okay, here. So he's saying that this, or whoever's writing this here, energy disk, it's replaced with corona motor generator. This particular disk here. It's a 9-foot diameter, 2-inch thick, silver in color alloys, aligns with center. So I've been told that this is actually aluminium or bottom ring of Tesla coil. So this is his change. He thinks that's a Tesla coil. That he's not sure about that. Is thought to spin at high speed to cause energize or cause spark arc 0-point energy section to regenerate or make electricity at X gain above unity. So this is to produce energy. It's saying, okay? Well, this is where I'm going to introduce the work of Alexander Shishkin that's never been considered with respect to anything like this work of Mark McCandish, and I'm going to talk about it today. Study of the characteristics of magnetotoroelectrical radiations using photographic film detectors. This publication is a preliminary version of an article being prepared. I'm going to translate this properly, so there might be some bad translations. I'm going to do all the diagrams as well. However, the authors considered it possible to convey its main points to the interested reader, since both the experimental material and theoretical understanding require broad discussion. An increasing number of scientists are inclined to believe that the physical vacuum is filled with tiny material particles with high penetrating power. Of the many names for this material environment, the most common are ether, dark matter, hidden matter, subtle matter, field matter. In their works, Vladimir Dubovic 1-2 and V. Tater claim that this hidden or field matter consists of background cold neutrinos, BCN. Dubovic is the discoverer, which is verified, of the toroidal moment and extensions thereof. He considers that the quintessence, the dark matter, is background cold neutrinos, BCNs. Possibly you can call them axions, linked to each other through weak topologically non-trivial bonds, and thus forming a background neutrino or axion condensate. In the near field around atoms, this neutrino condensate condenses, forming a field shells of background cold neutrinos. So this is the hidden energy within matter that I refer to as a fractal toroidal cluster of background cold neutrinos or background neutrinos, which is what they call in Russia, which, due to interaction with electrons of the atom striving to escape from the nucleus, are extremely dense. Therefore, due to such a compaction mechanism, the shells made of these, that's bad translation, that should be background cold neutrinos again, acquire a very high potential energy. The authors suggested that when the shell of background cold neutrinos is damaged mechanically by a strong electric field, that's a disruptive discharge, by thermal and or radiation. So in the case of Dr. Alexander Parkhomov, this is over 1,000 degrees, and or radiation, which can be gamma or X-rays, but normally gamma is better. With a certain probability, the nucleus flies out of it, and then the electron, which has lost its energy supply, the empty field shell retains the torus topology. Here we go. So the field shell that is produced around between the nucleus and the electrons has a torus topology. It's quite stable, and this is what they call magnetotoroelectrical radiation. Okay, you can see some bad translations down here. Has a high penetrating ability and carries the characteristics of the parent nucleus. In terms of penetrating ability, a large number of empty shells behave like radiation. The authors assigned the name magnetoelectric radiation. It's magnetotoroelectrical radiation. Yeah, magnetotoroelectric radiation, MTER. It's bad translation there. And a separate shell began to be called a magnetotoroelectrical cluster. So this is where you get some either ions or electrons joining the neutral exotic vacuum object, which is the magnetotoroelectrical radiation, and that will form a magnetotoroelectrical cluster, or what was originally called a charge cluster, or a magnetotoroelectrical radiation cluster. Numerous researchers have repeatedly recorded traces of strange radiation on X-ray detectors, including in the form of mechanical microdamage. Estimates have shown that in order to leave a similar trace by melting energy of over 10 to the 17 electron volts would be required. 10 to the 17 electron volts would be required. A hypothesis was put forward that the strange traces are caused by clusters of magnetotoroelectrical radiation, which release stored energy when destroyed. If a cluster is destroyed in the volume of an active detector, then anomalous signals should be recorded both in amplitude and in duration. As is now becoming clear, the registration of traces of so-called strange radiation on photodetectors has been perceived as some kind of dirt side effect since the discovery of radioactivity. Barkler observed this and called it J radiation. This is observed by many cold fusion researchers. It was also observed by Ivan Filimonenko in his original 1950s palladium and deuterium boiling water reactor, which was done in Soviet secret research. This phenomena began to be observed on mass scale more than 60 years ago by physicists studying particles of cosmic origin. Our research group has begun a meaningful study of the new component isolated from the background, which we have named magnetotoroelectrical radiation, MTER, using X-ray photodetectors of this kind from Belgium. So if anyone wants to replicate this work, this is the one you need to use. The term radiation is rather arbitrary and is used in the same way as alpha, beta, and gamma radiation. Unlike the massless quantum of ordinary electromagnetic radiation, i.e. photon, the new formation, essentially an empty field shell of the atom, is voluminous, but not heavy and carries a huge reserve of energy. This is the hidden energy within matter. In a word, it occupies an intermediate place between corpuscular radiation, protons, electrons, alpha particles, and gamma radiation. Right. When we come on in a separate presentation, which I hope to give, maybe I'll pre-record it and do it on Christmas Day, I will invoke this and explain, in my view, where you can get vast amounts of energy and unlimited from these systems. During preliminary studies, various traces of the impact of magnetotoroelectrical radiation clusters, this is MTEC, were recorded on photodetectors. So here we go. These are the impacts. Micro traces in the form of mechanical damage, for example, in the form of tread trace, here, this tread trace here, in photo 1 lower left corner, reaching 20 millimeters in length. Micro craters with diameters from fractions of a micrometer to 12 micrometers, photo 1, a large number of microcraters with diameters of 6.4 micrometers and 8.5 micrometers were detected on all developed photodetectors, including control ones. Macro traces in the form of nail indentations, photo 2, called birdies, by authors, which were formed during the explosive destruction of magnetotoroelectrical radiation with transverse size from 5 millimeters to 15 millimeters. We have registered a case of mechanical damage in the same place to 4 photodetectors with a total thickness of 0.76 millimeter. So these are the topological monopole, and as the structure breaks up, it pulls in electrons and it spits them out through the side, so you get these things called they call the birdie. Okay. Traces of destruction of the magnetotoroelectrical clusters with mechanical damage in the form of nail pressing of photodetectors are located on the birds in places of blackening, numbering from left to right, on the side of the microwave oven. So a microwave oven will produce this. Why? Because a microwave oven can produce charge clusters. What do you think about that? Above, the duralumin plate pre-irradiated with a dose of 5 grays from cobalt-60 on this date in 2011. Near the bucket of paraffin in which a plutonium beryllium neutron source is located. The cluster may disintegrate into separate vortices. On photodetectors, this phenomena is registered as separate black drops, photo 3, spindle-shaped traces, or veils, which are usually concentrated in the corners of the photodetector. So here's some drops where they're breaking up. Matsumoto saw some similar things. Traces of magnetotoroelectrical clusters decay on a photodetector placed in a magnetic field. As a result of the work carried out, microscopic traces of MTEI, generated magnetotoroelectrical radiation, generated in various ways, were studied, from water after processing and a hydrodynamic generator. This is a cavitation device. From bodies of revolution made of various materials. This is what we're going to be focusing on here regarding the ARV. From materials irradiated with gamma radiation, from the gamma source cobalt-60, by applying a high voltage pulse to a photodetector located in a flat capacitor. Okay, this was done by him and also by Dr. Alexander Parkhomov. This is effectively the same kind of thing that was helping the Hutchison effect with John Hutchison samples. Right, this is critical now what you're going to see. Analysis of microscopic traces of magnetotoroelectrical radiation from bodies of revolution. Experiments with bodies of revolution were conducted on a special setup. The setup consists of a brushless high-speed motor up to 50,000 RPM. So I've often said this is 5,000 RPM, but I've got it wrong. It's 50,000 RPM, apologies. Mounted to a tabletop, a motor power supply unit, and a motor remote control device. Bodies of revolution made of various materials, made in the form of cones with a diameter of 20 millimeters and a height of 20 millimeters, were mounted on the motor axis photo 4. So these are all different types of materials in the form of a cone. Bodies of revolution made of different materials. Okay? To ensure the safety of work near engines with bodies of revolution, a protective casing was mounted inside which, along the wall of the casing, perpendicular to the bases of the cones, and above it, perpendicular to the axis of rotation, photodetectors were placed, packed in light-proof bags. A series of experiments were conducted on the exposure of photodetectors with the following bodies of revolution: graphite, aluminum, titanium, copper, bismuth, zirconium, iron, cadmium, lead. In this case, light materials, graphite, aluminium, titanium, rotated at speeds of about 40,000 revolutions per minute. Heavy ones, at least 15,000 revolutions per minute. The exposure time for all bodies of revolutions was 360 plus or minus 20 seconds. The temperature during measurements was 25 degrees plus or minus 5 degrees C. Comparative analysis was performed by comparing microdamages in different areas of photodetectors. In the plane of the base of the rotating cones, about 35 millimeters from the bottom of the photodetector, at different heights from the plane of the base of the cones, on the upper photodetector located perpendicular to the axis of rotation of the cones. Spiral traces. On all photodetectors located perpendicular to the base of the cones, of the bodies of the revolution, microobjects in the form of rings, semi-rings, and spirals, hyperbolic and logarithmic spirals are observed, which are located over the entire surface of the negatives. The highest concentration of observed is in the central vertical parts of the negatives, approximately 2.5 to 7.5 centimeters from the bottom. On photodetectors located perpendicular to the axis of revolution, no special differences from control samples were found. Photo 5 shows an example of spirals detected by operator registered by the photodetector near the body of revolution made by iron. So these are spirals. I think they're drawn on there. So they've had to draw the spirals where they are, I guess. Spiral objects on photodetector exposed near iron body of rotation. No clear pattern of distribution of spiral objects applicable to the bodies of revolution was identified, since the distribution of objects on the surface of negative is non-uniform. And on films with low emulsion concentration, like films, it was practically impossible to see the objects. For example, films with body of revolution made of copper. It was not possible to perform a quantitative analysis of the spiral traces for the following reasons: a high labor intensity and subjective dependence, yeah, I would say so, of the detection of spiral traces on the quality and quality of training of the health of the operator, i.e. what their eyesight was. In the nature, the mechanisms of the appearance of spiral traces are unknown. Well, we might have an idea. So we cannot yet establish the parameters by which the analysis should be carried out. The quality of photographs is highly dependent on the quality of the developer, film and development modes, and therefore varies from batch to batch. Table 1 describes the qualitative characteristics and objects detected on photodetectors located near the various bodies of revolution. Now, this is interesting, and this is why it's relevant, I think, to the ARV. Element of body of revolution, macro objects, peculiarities. Cadmium, spirals, rings, stripes. Many large and medium objects, spirals are mostly broken. Spirals are mostly broken, strongly twisted. Lead, spirals, half rings. Objects on the medium are large, many breaks and parts of objects. Many breaks and parts of objects. Spirals are slightly and mediumly twisted. Copper, spirals, rings, semi-rings, small and medium-sized objects, almost without breaks with copper. There are parts of objects, spirals are slightly twisted. Iron, spirals and half rings, many breaks and parts of the objects. Bismuth, spirals, rings, medium-sized semicircles are also encountered, spirals are slightly twisted. So bismuth, interesting. Zirconium, interesting. Zirconium, but bismuth, no magnesium, but anyway. Spirals, semicircles and stripes. Small and medium-sized objects, some large, many breaks in parts of the object. Spirals are moderately twisted. Aluminium, spirals, rings and semi-rings. Medium-sized objects, large ones occur. Rings and spirals with virtually no breaks. Spirals are strongly twisted. Rings and spirals with virtually no breaks. Spirals are strongly twisted. Carbon, spirals, rings, semi-rings. The objects are medium and large. There are many breaks and parts of the objects are twisted. So out of all of these, aluminium, in my view, based on what I know, is producing the cleanest magnetotoroelectrical radiation. The cleanest. And note that aluminium is the only element that was used by Tesla to produce clean, not dirty, etheric matter rays. I believe that aluminium is being used in the... Okay, if we... oh, where has it gone now? Have I lost it? Give me a second. What did I do with that? Okay. Okay. I lost it. Come on. Okay. All right. Back here. These are some tracks. There's some tracks there. Blah, blah, blah. Another track. Tread. These are some impressions. Okay, so that's the spinning, rotating bodies. Okay, so in my view, aluminium spun at high speed, and that would be, in this case, 40,000 revolutions per minute. I don't know whether it's going to be achieving that, but it's a matter of, you know, proportion. I think that this aluminium disc here will be throwing out, potentially, magnetotoroelectrical clusters. These are dark matter clusters. Okay? And then you have this section here with these lines in it. And if we go and look at this, They call this an antenna section, 12 foot inner diameter, 12 top 18-inch wide, outer edge slopes at 35 degrees, total thickness, blah, blah, blah. Embedded thick rings spaced 3/8 of an inch apart, embedded in green colored glass or plastic. Rings had a copper color, right? Now, what I'll say here is that we know that in the Lion reactor, exotic vacuum objects, toroidal structures, were produced in the diamond nickel deuterium core, which had 22 kilohertz vibrations in there and thermal heat. These aggregated in the copper wires that were surrounding the outside of the core. And we know that they accumulated enough energy such that when the reactor was turned off, and then Neil Crichton Gold, sadly departed, attached a 20-watt light bulb to a drain at the other end, which I infer is a large piece of either copper or aluminium grounding rod, because he had those in his effects, although he never told me. He just said there's a kind of drain. That there was the sucking sound, this crunching sound, the temperature dropped something like 1,000 degrees a second. Over 2 seconds, it went from nearly 1,000 degrees to minus 273 degrees in a couple of sample points to absolute zero. That, I believe, was these clusters that had emitted energy as they had condensed into this dense cluster state. They'd come out and they got locked into the copper, and that then flowed and got broken up as it went and illuminated the filament in that halogen bulb. I think that's what's happening in this instance is these fully insulated rings potentially could accumulate the emitted magnetotoroelectrical radiation that are coming out of this fast spinning disk. If this is a Tesla coil and it is putting high voltage onto this disk, the Tesla coil is known to produce magnetotoroelectrical clusters. Those would go into the metal and then they would be migrating out and thrown out. And because they're neutral, they would go into potentially these copper rings. Now, what would that do? Well, these would attach themselves together, and as far as I can work out, it is in a key part of the magnetotoroelectrical structure. So I think that that may be what's going on in there. This is a theory that no one has put forward, but it's something that's consistent with the observations by Shishkin, Dubovik, and other people working on magnetotoroelectrical radiation, which are the neutral exotic vacuum objects. Right. This is an F4 ejection seat here, and with controls on armrests. The throttle is on the right here. This is the throttle. It's just a push forward and back, and it would make sense if you're just changing the voltage up and down by doing that. And the control is on the left. This control here that we were talking about, this bowl type device. Now it describes the control here. Silver bowl is affected by gravity. In hover mode, the craft occasionally dipped from side to side in slight degrees. The bowl would slip slightly in pendulum fashion toward the direction of the dip and correct to a level hover. Very, very, very logical. As this moves, it would, let's say, change the bias potential on the same side, which would push that side harder. It would move the vector of the overall gravitational wave coming through the center, and that would right the craft. It's totally logical. Carbon or Kevlar fiber, I hope it's carbon because that will be good against the magnetotoroelectrical radiation. Pultruded ball, lead lined. So the lead line would stop X-rays, okay? 12-foot diameter, covered by an EMF coating. So the EMF coating would stop EMF, but we would also want this coating on there that would stop the strange radiation. Wall thickness 3 to 4 inches. Over here, cylindrical core amplifier is a pure vacuum for trapping 0-point or scalar energy, apparently, in here, in this core. The chamber produces 10 to the 26 joules per cubic meter of vacuum. 10 to the 26 joules, so they're definitely talking about 0-point energy there. Yeah? So that is accumulating in the center. I would agree that the accumulation occurs in the center of the magnetotoroelectrical cluster of the fractal toroidal moment. At the phase singularity, it will create a very, very high level of energy concentration. The central column is approximately 2 feet in diameter and 12 feet high. It supports 4 ejection seats on rails and 9-foot diameter disc. CCD remote cameras under 14-inch glass are acrylic sphere, 1 on top, 6 on side of crewcraft. Hatch is a submarine door. Okay. Witness claimed there were 3 ARVs in hangar, 24, 16, and 130 feet in diameter. Okay, that's what we had from Mark McCandish. 4-star general making presentation claimed ARV to be capable of light speed or better. Pilots experience no sense of movement. There we go. Pilots experience no sense of movement. There we go. That's exactly what you would expect. No inertia. Why? Because the background neutrinos are the thing that go through atoms. They are a model of gravity, and they are the thing that causes inertia. If you have a thing which these things can't penetrate because they're in different parts of the structure and bounded outside, then you will not feel inertia. Composite side plates covered by EMF coating attached by something, I can't read that, Zeus type fasteners connecting and enclosing a capacitor section. Okay. Outer edge slopes is at 35 degrees. Witness claimed that temperature in hangar was much colder near the alien reproduction vehicle. Outside temperature was 102 degrees on 12th of November 88. There you go. Boom. Just as was being said by Hal Puthoff, it will take energy from the environment and it will make that environment cooler. Just as John Hutchison said when he was running the Hutchison effect, it would cool the environment. This might be because it's taking that energy and it's condensing it. It's upshifting it potentially into non-thermal photons. This might explain what you see when you get the magnetotoroelectrical clusters causing transmutation on Amasa gas on metal samples. You can go and look at the end of the beginning or the beginning of the end, something like that, when I did that stream and the other videos when we looked at Amasa gas and on indium foil, which turned to jelly before it ever got close to melting. The indium foil, which normally melts at 156.6 degrees C, glowed brighter than the sun, right? Now, is it because the thermal energy that's coming in is getting caught in those hydrodynamics, those fractal magnetohydrodynamic structures that are the thing that creates the phase singularities, and it creates that bubble, and on the boundary of that bubble, inside that bubble, and on the boundary, the double there, it's causing a difference in the permittivity of the vacuum, which means the speed light's different and you're getting a blue shift. You're getting a blue shift and it's moving from thermal straight to UV or much brighter, whiter light. Okay. You're going to see this in other technologies. You're going to see it in other technologies. Okay? Just saying. Oxygen tanks 12 to 14 inches in diameter, 6 feet long, radially mounted above capacitor. Anything else? Additional oxygen, approximately 4 feet. This is a thing for... Okay, that's it. Radiuses or blended edge next to sphere. Anything else? Anything else? Not really. Okay. There we go. So that is the ARV here. And it is, in my view, as I've said many times before, a magnetotor electrical radiation potentially, but a magnetotor gravitic structure. Let me see if I can bring up my Cosmic Summit presentation here. And then we're going to look at two other presentations that I think they'll nail this, and we'll be good. Alex Carton, what are the size energy to the size of the craft ratio? I don't think it needs to be any different. I think it's the same principle, and it can be any size, any weight. Listen to what Tesla said in 1911. Yeah? You just apply the principle, and then the thing that I think they need to be quantized. I think the sizes are important, actually, to build it to that size. Yeah? But once you know the quantization, then you just build the same mechanics, and it's just the same structure bit gets built at a different quantization level because it's a fractal toroidal thing, and you spin it up more. Skoggy Hoggins says, question, if the pilot doesn't experience inertia, how does the ball control react? Is it only in yeah, it's only in hover mode. Yeah, it's only in hover mode. And we've shown where the hover mode works. So let me press play here. Okay. So this is my presentation at the Cosmic Summit. And I'm going to get rid of the titles. We don't need the titles. Okay. So we looked at a Hutchison sample there, and we had a yang and a yin. It's typical 20 micron structure. You can see the hole and the peak in these two structures on the boundary layer between this teleported metal that teleported into this lump of aluminium. And on the boundary layer, we saw the iron-rich crenellated spheres, which we now know are the core of the fractal toroidal geometry. And of course, it is this iron and oxygen predominantly. There's a little bit of chrome because this would have stripped metal out of the knife because it got bound to the iron in the knife. Okay, moving on. This is going to become relevant in a discussion later, which I'll only do a part explanation of in this presentation, and the next presentation of significance will come to this. But this is Winston Bostick doing the first plasma toroids and saying that this could be the basis for the structure of all matter from subatomic to the formation of galaxies. And of course, propulsion here, which we saw Richard Eskridge was a principal at NASA doing plasmoid propulsion. But what this is a deuterated titanium electrode, produces a current loop, very high current pulse, short duration, forms this loop, and that comes off, and it's a fixed current loop, and it has these magnetic poloidal moments on there, and so on. And so basically you end up with two yin and yang structures coming together in the center. Now, this was solved by Shoulders and is solved by nature because nature, in the form of the bee, has the exotic vacuum objects coming off in a torus, and so does Ken Shoulders. And I think Ken Shoulders probably got his work from the electrical particles of matter ray gun in the 1930s of Nikola Tesla. Okay, so these are your various kind of smoke ring toroids. And remember that the first person we were listening to today talked about the smoke ring type, but charge cluster charged particle beams. This is how we derived our 48. This is our 48 structure, the wheel within a wheel within a wheel minimally. And this is the 48 on the flying disc of the sky gods on the Sumerian tablet. This is, just so I can give him credit in this presentation, Vladimir Dubovic, who died April 27th this year. Sad to see him go. Again, another person I would have loved to have spoken to. We showed how we can make matter disappear. And on the boundary in this Henk-Uren experiment, we found the various structures. And this is critical. And as I've said, 4 is the first time it comes under control. But to get this properly working, you need at least 6. Right? And, you know, what do we say? We need at least 6. And of course, 48 can be divided by 6. Okay? All right. Then I showed here, yeah, so here you can see 4 is where the disruption beam goes into the non-radiating boundary of the substructure on the in the ring of a Tor above. But when we get to 5, it's well inside the non-radiating boundary. But only when you get to 6 does the disruption beam go inside the apple. And the apple is very, very critical. Here is what I was referring to earlier, the 1979 propulsion concept by A.C. Holt, field resonance propulsion concept. And in this diagram, they have the current loop, current loop, current loop, current loop, current loop, current. They've chosen 6. So this is the person that went on to lead the propulsion in a degree and then eventually worked with Hal Puthoff and Eric Davis in much more recent times on propulsion systems. And here we've got the magnetic fields reconnecting to produce a vortex in the center, which is the toroidal moment that leads to the monopole, which you can see on this peer-reviewed 2020 research, which you can see here on the Aalto University synthetic monopole, but eventually it became found on a Bose-Einstein condensate. Here is the hypertoroidal moment that leads to the apple shape and so forth. This is the flight to Alpha Centaurus. We discussed this last time where they released the hidden energy within matter, and they say that this is the same thing as cold fusion. This is from classified paper from 1992. This video, we show how these things don't interact with each other, or they, if it's going to let it play, it's going to let it play. There we go. This is how they interact with each other, but not with the field here. This is an actual picture of a toroid, or a video of a toroid with the vortex coming in. And this is looking through the ball lightning sheath. And when you see that flash, it's firing off. It's come destabilized from its umbilical cord, and it's shooting off and leaving these marks on the fused quartz with a 6-order structure, a 4-order structure, a multi-order structure here. And these are better resolved ones than were observed by Bostic and Nardi. And we're going to see a paper which is going to blow your mind in a second. It's going to be by the Propulsion Labs, which we looked at last time. But you can see here that in Bostic and Nardi's work, this is a torus with tori orthogonally arranged. Okay? And so we come down to our ARV down here. And the ARV, in my view, is positioned such that the capacitor arrays at the bottom can do the spinning of this. And, you know, you kind of want it spinning around that way, right? To give the, or rather that way, to give the vector up, okay? And this is very much like the magnetohydrodynamics of the 1967 King paper and the 1970 paper of the British Railways Board. But there it is. It's exactly this. This is the hole where the geometry is. The seats are in the safe notch, which is the Yukon of Sara from from Finland. And this hovering height is very, very critical. The hovering height. So this is an image supposedly that Mark McCandish drew of this particular hangar with these three, and they could go into the small one. And it hovers at a particular height. And the height, I believe, is this height. So that it's got a very specific height, and it's very specifically this height above the ground. And the reason that is because when this is spun up to a very low degree, where you can walk up this level and go in, it's fairly safe, respective to human physiology, when it's only interacting at this point. And so where you get that from is, if I've got it here, have I got it in this presentation? Somewhere, yes, I've got it here somewhere. Yeah. In the yin yang here, you can see that the material here is only affected inside this black circle, which is just outside the white circle here. Okay. And that's just basically how it works. You see, it's only affected here, it's only affected here, it's only affected here. And that's essentially what I think is going on. This is a hydrodynamic because it's in water, though it's polar molecule, it becomes a magnetohydrodynamic. Magnetohydrodynamic plasma, magnetohydrodynamic water cavitation, magnetohydrodynamic. And so that is why I believe that they float when they're not spun up a lot. They float at that particular height. Okay. Right, now the next paper that I'm going to share is this one. That's the money shot for it. And this is prior to the previous paper that I shared on force-free spherical plasmoids. This is the final report for the period of 1989 to July 1990, which was published in 1991. And this is, again, from the Phillips Laboratory at Air Force Systems Command Propulsion Directorate, Edwards Air Force Base. And here we go, Franklin B. Mead again. And you can see here, this actually is from 7th of February, 89. So this is prior to Pons and Fleischmann's announcement. Prior to Pons and Fleischmann's announcement. Okay, and then 7th of July 1990. Okay, and by 7th of July 1990, actually just after that, Dr. Takei Matsumoto published his first thoughts on his first year or so of cold fusion research. And he said here on the front cover, miniban, gravity decay of quad neutrons, discovered on August the 25th, 1990 in nuclear emulsion during cold fusion. Gravity decay of quad neutrons. 1990. Gravity decay. Unification of the forces. Sorry. Not sorry. Right. So when you read this paper, they talk about the background and how they're planning to do it and all the different things they were going to do. And essentially, nothing really happened much. They had a very low pressure environment down to 10 millitorr. They had voltages that go up to 50,000 volts. And if I go to my notes here, so the configuration was like this, and I have a similar system, I think, that was conducted in France. Here, or this might have been the work that was done in America. Here we go, Starburst Foundation Electrogravitics blog. So you can see this is the vacuum chamber, and here is the torsion device with some electrodes here and some electrodes here. So maybe they're trying to find whether this thing kicks up or something like that. Okay. So looks a similar thing. You've got your big vacuum system here. some viewports. So if you look here on the side here, it's got some viewports here, here, here. Okay. This looks like the vacuum system here. And they have this devices in the center here, right? So this is the test support, and it's one variation of it. And here we can see that the pumping of the vacuum back down to about 10 to the -6 torr. They used 60 kilovolts here. So the high voltage sources to drive the devices under test consisted of a pair of Spellman regulated 0 to 60 kilovolt DC power supplies, model this one, each of which had a maximum power output of 30 watts. They're not using a lot of power here. The voltage polarity of each supply was reversible internally, but not directly switchable for safety reasons. These two separate high voltage power supplies could be grounded at a common earth ground and operated back to back, with one providing negative voltage and the other providing positive. This enabled one electrode of each test device to be set at an arbitrary positive potential with respect to ground, and another electrode to be set at a selected negative potential. This also allowed complete flexibility in testing the potentials of device electrodes relative to the grounded chamber. I'll come back to that in a minute. So, near the end of this experiment program, we briefly examined the force generation effects with pulsed fields in which we had a peak voltage of 19 kilovolts. Tests, blah, 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 using pulse repetition rates of 10, 60, 150, 400, and 600 hertz. So, the fastest pulse repetition rate they did in this experiment was 600 hertz. Typically, they were doing between 10 and 600 hertz. Generally, no motion of the test devices was observed, except in test number 69, where very small but detectable motion was seen. Okay, two tests, number 81 and 82, were conducted to maximize the effect of forces generated by test devices where dielectric was used, which had a significantly larger dielectric constant than the possessed by acrylic. Each of these two tests used test devices of type 2C with a ceramic piezoelectric material of lead titanate, lead zirconate. This material had a dielectric constant of about 1750 along the length of the cylinder. This sounds like some sort of material that John Hutchison would be using. The force behaviors in test number 81 and 82 remain anomalous compared with the results observed when no breakdowns were occurring across the dielectric in the test devices. Right. Essentially, if you go into the data of this paper, which I will share, they saw literally no force at all in any test unless they had a dielectric breakdown experiment. And that is what Ken Shoulders used to produce exotic vacuum objects. It's also what Proton 21 labs used when they were doing their 1/10 of C relativistic discharges that produced all of the elements in the periodic table, regardless of the metal target you hit, and also remediated nuclear waste or nuclear materials, beta isotopes, that were put into the target tip. Verified by the US National Labs and part now of the US Nuclear Fusion Program. What produces exotic vacuum objects is what produced the force in this device. And I'm going to show you it was type 2. These are the different types they had between these supports. And if you can imagine, and this is representing a type 2, you have a little ball and a big plate. And if you have your discharge between the little ball and the big plate, and this comes round here and becomes that one's positive, like go around there, you have a discharge this way and a discharge that way, a discharge this way and a discharge that way. Torsion. Vortex that way, vortex anti-vortex. Is that what they were trying to achieve? Is that what they were trying to achieve? But whatever, they only saw force when they put a dielectric in between this electrode and this electrode. And when the dielectric broke down, they saw the event happening. And that's because when the dielectric breaks down, you get a disruptive discharge. Exactly what Tesla used in his demonstration units, exactly what was key to John Hutchison effect. That is when you get this breakdown of the dielectric. You get these very, very fast high current DIDT, high current rise in an extremely small fraction of time. And that is when you break the vacuum. You charge separate it and you get this incredible tearing force, this tearing in the ether, this turbulence in the ether, and you get the formation of exotic vacuum objects. Now, this is in a chamber. This only when it's in this form. Now, the point about Ken Shoulders' work, he would use 2 kiloelectron volts in a low pressure environment, because if you go over 2 kiloelectron volts, you can break the EVOs themselves. Okay, and he also had a point, and he wetted it with mercury. Now, Tesla, in his disruptive discharge unit, he used a tungsten wire or mercury that would then form a Taylor cone and use the discharges that way. Ken Shoulders basically combined the two. So he had a tungsten wire and it was wetted with mercury. Okay, so the tungsten wire would form the foundation for the mercury that then would form the Taylor cone and do the electrical particles of matter from the space charge arrangement that came from the tip of the tip of the tip of the Taylor cone that forms. You've got an extreme high charge concentration on the end, which then broke away and travels towards the anode. Okay, so when you remember what I told you last week and you vary it, not for this type of configuration, like this, but for a configuration that would be in line with what I said you needed to do for that, and you have here and here with this type of configuration, number 2, not these ball and plate like this, or this and this and this, or plate and plate. No, like this, but actually a more Ken Shoulders type device in this kind of configuration. But learning from what I told you last week, with pulses of up to this amount, I think we're getting there. But more on that later. Not today. So the conclusion here, effectively, if we go back one, right. So key observations made during these tests can be summarized. The anomalous force was associated with the occurrence of electrical breakdowns over or through the piezoelectric dielectric between electrodes as electrodes held at potential differences of about 19 kilovolts. The anomalous force seemed to increase as the rate of breakdown pulsing increased. So you have more pulses, you get more force, even though the observed pulsing rates were no more than a few pulses per second. The force increased even though you're only doing a few pulses per second. This is the only circumstances that they observe this under. The piezoelectric nature of the dielectric material may be important to anomalous force generation. It's important for production of exotic vacuum objects. That's what I think is important. Right. Basically, the conclusions are most things did not work. And here we go on 5. Anomalous propulsive force generation results were obtained during 2 tests with a ball and plate type of test device when these electrodes were separated by high dielectric constant ceramic piezoelectric material, and only when electrical breakdown occurred between the electrodes. The magnitude of anomalous force observed tended to increase at the rate of breakdown pulsing as the rate of breakdown pulsing increased, even though observed pulsing rates were no more than a few pulses per second. So it says here, these are the recommendations, and the one I've highlighted here, such investigations should initially be conducted without the complication of operating within a vacuum chamber. Of course, if you don't have a vacuum chamber, you have to up the voltages, or you have to reduce the distance between your electrodes. But you could end up with a situation where you have injection of pulses that builds a force. And if you're doing it in such a way that the charge clusters can aggregate, it's for another time. I'm going to show you the next paper, and this is going to be my last paper of the day, and it's a doozy. It's also published. Right, let me find this. Have I got it here? Right. You're going to like this one. It is a defense intelligence reference document. Yes, it's just reference, okay? From the 1st of December 2009. Okay? And where is it from? Anti-gravity for aerospace applications. Anti-gravity for aerospace applications, just as you would want, right? It's alien gravity though, because we don't have anti-gravity. We only have propulsion. So it's got a whole load of things in here. You can look at these, but I'm not really interested in most of them. Anti-gravity effects can be implemented by manipulating space-time. Well, we've definitely been certain about that in this presentation. This paper reviews several different theoretical approaches for exploring the possibility of controlling gravity by generating forces that counteract or otherwise modify gravity for the purposes of aerospace propulsion. Einstein's general theory of relativity is a theoretical framework guiding this study. The paper also reviews other anti-gravity approaches via the interaction of quantum theory with gravitation, and it explores the question of which method or technique is best suited for aerospace applications and evaluates the make or break issues. Make or break, interesting, issues that limit them. Right. Here we go. Introduction. Gravity is the bane of aerospace transportation. The force of the Earth's gravitational field acts to pull all objects, whether in motion or at rest, downward towards the Earth's surface. Because aerospace transportation involves the motion of vehicles through the atmosphere and or into space, propulsion engineers are always faced with the requirement that aerospace vehicles will have to carry enough propellant and associated tankage in order to provide enough propulsive thrust to overcome the downward pull of gravity and achieve rectilinear motion. Energy has to be expended by a propulsion system to overcome the force of gravity. In addition to providing rectilinear motion, the majority of propulsive energy is dedicated to overcome gravity. The aerospace propulsion engineer is faced with two choices for control of gravity in this regard: passive control of and active control. Modern aerospace propulsion technology, which is based on accumulated scientific knowledge since recorded history, can only achieve the passive control of gravity, whereby a given propulsion device must develop a thrust that will passively counteract the Earth's gravitational pull, lift a vehicle off the surface, and propel it through the air into space. Newton's laws of motion and gravity require that the fuel fraction of any aerospace vehicle can never be less than that given by a simple function of the ratio of the vehicle's maximum speed to the speed of its rocket plume, jet, fan, or propeller wake. For example, this limit implies that a single-stage rocket that accelerates to escape velocity must be composed of more than 93% fuel. That is because the rocket must accelerate its working fluid from rest relative to the rocket up to its exhaust speed. Thus, exhaust speed for aircraft and chemical rockets are limited by material science, chemical reaction rates, and engineering factors to only a few thousand meters per second. To date, there is no technology that can achieve the active control of gravity. All right, fine. If one can eliminate or otherwise control the Earth's gravity field, then one has the ability to dramatically reduce the amount of propellant, its tankage, and overall structure and size of an aircraft or rocket, because there will no longer be any need for these to overcome the pull of the Earth's gravity while transporting a payload across the globe or into space. Instead, aerospace vehicles will only need to have the propellant mass and infrastructure necessary to change their kinetic energy from rest to a final velocity necessary to achieve atmospheric flight or space orbit. The Earth's gravitational well will no longer have any impact on aircraft, launch vehicle, or space flight dynamics if one were to achieve gravity control. Aerospace vehicles would merely levitate in the air, and their propulsion systems would be optimized for change in velocity missions. However, it is possible to envisage a form of active gravity control propulsion that would not require a change in kinetic energy. One of the primary concepts for goal of affecting gravity is anti-gravity. Genius. Which is a colloquial expression that specifically means negation or repulsion of the force of gravity. We prefer propulsion because it works in space as well. You don't need a gravitational body. A more general term that encompasses this notion and other possibilities is gravity control. No, we like propulsion. We like propulsion. If anti-gravity exists, it can be exploited to counteract or nullify the gravitational pull or attraction of the planetary or stellar body that acts upon a much smaller body. Einstein's general theory of relativity gives prescription for a variety of different anti-gravity generators. Even Newton's law of gravity offers several different classical prescriptions. Newton's law of gravity can be used to simply nullify the gravity field of one body acting on another by using a clever arrangement of masses. The theoretical possibility of anti-gravity also appears in quantum gravity theories, cosmological vacuum or dark energy, and quantum field theory. This report reviews all of these topics. The report will also review the topics of gravity control that include the production of anti-gravity self-lifting forces induced by quantum vacuum zero point energy, and by non-retarded quantum interatomic dispersion forces in curved space-time, that is, in a background gravitational field. The reader should bear in mind that many of these concepts are nowhere near having any form of replicatable or predictable engineering implementation. However, the report will provide theoretical estimates to guide the way toward technical implementation of anti-gravity. Okay. Negating Newtonian gravity, blah, 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 blah. Energy estimate for blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. Not interested, right? Forward's dipole gravitational field generator. Blah, 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 blah. Unfortunately, blah, 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 blah. You need ridiculous amounts of things here. To counteract the Earth's gravitational force of 1g requires an anti-gravity field of 1g vectored upwards. And thus, the dwarf star density material within the pipes must achieve 10 to 11 meters per second in order to accomplish this effect. Right, so in these pipes, you have to have level of dwarf star density achieving 10 to the 11 meters per second in order to achieve this effect. Right. What was calculated by Lutz and Jaegner for a plasmatoriid, a plasmoid? He said that it is the density of a neutron star, the form of a pulsar. Bit more than a dwarf star, right? So if the density is much higher than a dwarf star, then potentially you don't have to accelerate it so fast. But, nah. This is what we're looking at. My friends, this is what we're looking at. Figure 2, dipole gravitational field generator. Using equation 5, forward in reference 13 and 14 showed that there would be a need to accelerate matter with the density of a dwarf star through pipes as wide as a football field wound around a torus with kilometer dimensions in order to produce an anti-gravity field at the center of the torus. Where is an acceleration of the dwarf star density matter through pipes, the tiny factor blah is even smaller, blah, 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 blah. Forward's reference 5 also identified a configuration. Forward's reference 5 also identified a configuration comprising of rotating torus of dense matter that turns inside out like a smoke ring as another type of dipole gravitational field generator. Where have we heard something like that before? That turns inside out like a smoke ring as another type of dipole gravitational field generator. As shown in figure 3, an inside-out turning ring of very dense mass will create an upward force of acceleration A. What have we said? That an exotic vacuum object has a higher binding energy. It is denser than ordinary matter. it can be very, very dense in the direction of the constant mass rotation is the mass velocity. This is also a feature of the Lenz-Thirring effect. Ford's linearization analysis generalizes all of these forces into the following two key ingredients that are required to produce anti-gravity forces. Any mass with a velocity and an acceleration exerts many different general relativistic forces on a test mass. These forces act in the direction of the velocity and in the direction of the acceleration of the originating mass. In summary, these forces are equivalent to gravitational forces, which can be used to cancel the Earth's gravitational field. Figure 3, dipole gravitational field generator, inside out whirling dense matter torus. One can also view this genre of devices as a gravity catapult machine in which the machine pushes a body away using its general relativistic anti-gravity forces to impart a change in velocity. A space launch operator on the ground wanting to send a payload up into orbit would just ratchet up the strength of the upward directed anti-gravity field to some value above 1g, and after passing the release button, the payload accelerates up and away into orbit. There you go. That is what you should consider here. That's just pulsing it up. These devices could also be placed in Earth orbit, stationed anywhere within the solar system, or even distributed throughout the galaxy in order to establish a network of gravity catapults. Space travelers could begin their trip by being launched from the catapult on Earth's surface, and when they reach the space, they would jump through various catapults as needed to reach their destination. Anyway, the point about that thing there, this thing there, right, is it's only looking at one torus. And I can't believe that given Bostic's drawings and Nardi's drawings in their papers in 1980, I can't believe that here in 2009, it isn't anything other than deliberate, limited hangout, that they are not showing a torus within a torus within a tori. It has to be a deliberate hangout. I can't believe it's anything else. And if you have a torus, which the smaller these things get, the much higher the magnetic field gets in there, and the much higher the pinching, the much denser the material. Okay? And if you've got a torus made of tori, 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 the more you go, the denser that's going to get. And each one of those is going to be a slingshot, which is going to slingshot material around inside it. And then that's going to be a slingshot that slings material around inside it. And that's going to be a slingshot that's, and so on, orthogonally, XYZ. And we know that it moves material around it because we've seen it. We've seen it in our experiments. We've seen it on the quartz in the Lion reactor and in the Vega reactor. We've seen it in the Hutchison sample, the fracture sample from 2007, where it's sweeping the material around it. That's just on the outer boundary. Imagine what it's like in the center of those fractal toroidal things. It's literally like a collider. It's like a circular collider going around. Extreme density in a very small space, moving around very fast, orthogonally in each plane. That is what's going on. And the idea in this paper that there are no practical things out there, well, I'm just going to play. No, I'm not. I'm just going to say it. There are. You have been lied to. More than 50 years ago, a 17-year-old boy showed a device on White Sands testing grounds. He'd built it himself. And when it was triggered in front of the former Nazi scientist, it launched into the air, I am told, at Mach 37. So fast that they barely were able to see it on radar. It basically disappeared from in front of their face. That is not the only example. There is a technology out there that does this right now. And it's not in the black world. It's real. It's real. You don't need a star. You don't need antimatter. And it works exactly how we say it works. The fractal toroidal moment allows for, at each fractal toroidal level, a phase singularity to allow coherence of matter and propulsion of matter within those. And when they're linked together and linked together into a ring, it's propelling it around, and it's a slingshot slinging into a slingshot, slinging it into a slingshot. Denser, 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 faster, faster, faster. Denser, 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 faster, faster, faster. Ying, 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 ying. XYZ, XYZ, XYZ. It will cohere energy from the vacuum. It can cause matter to collapse. It does form a non-radiating boundary, a bubble in space-time that allows it to be not subject to the forces around it. It works not against gravity. This is alien gravity. We don't want anti-gravity. Anti-gravity is pretty useless. And I'm sorry, my friend, that warned me to not talk about unification of the forces. It unifies the forces. Go and look at Proton 21's labs. Right? Go and look at what Matsumoto says. What do you think this is? What do you think that is? What do you think that is? Point of electronuclear collapse. In a vortexy thing that goes through a wormhole, comes out, new elements born. Boom. It's already been done. Infinite energy and the ability to float as if nothing. My friends, this was O-Day Alien Gravity. My name is Bob Greenyer. Thank you very much for your time. And I'll just run through those videos again that I shared at the beginning of the presentation. Thank you to David for sending them to me this morning, having them being published this very same day.
Kept a very low profile for 7 months, but I continued to do my research, and I wrote Dr. Maxfield a letter, and that was perhaps my mistake. I said, look, I've done it. I've figured out the wave equation that we were looking for. And again, in my ignorance, I didn't realize how much work had already been done and gone before me. I was just kind of on the periphery or the edge of this whole development.
That's a device to be able to make things like flying saucers fly, is it?
Yes. Also, it's a device to store energy in the form of motion, like of a small star or a big atom. It's called, this is a long word, an MHD plasma, magnetohydrodynamic plasma, like ball lightning, and it contains itself. But it's a way to turn all sorts of electricity into a high voltage battery. Now, this would have been an immediate solution for the Middle East oil blockade at that time. Now, I wrote the letter in good faith, trying to say, look, we can stop the threat of war in the Middle East by using this as an alternate energy source. It's very portable, it's non-polluting. It had some byproduct radiation problems, but things we could solve. It would be cleaner than fission or fusion. Now, that's when people here in this country, at the Aeronautical Research Labs, politicians started to get a hold of me. ASIO contacted me. Good grief. An ad infinitum chain of intelligence people, including 2 CIA people from the States. And then the FBI eventually started looking for me in this country, and that again was after the intelligence war over there, after Hoover died. And I was unable to finish my research in this country. In fact, I met many dead ends in government departments and research facilities where they told me privately, like Dr. Tom Keeble in the Aeronautical Research Labs. He told me, yes, we know about the flying saucers your countrymen have built, and in England and in Canada, And in fact, we have film records of them here in the RAAF files.
I want to stop you there.
Yeah.
Are you saying, Stan, that there are such things as, let's call them flying saucers, but they are built on Earth?
Yes. That doesn't mean that I rule out the possibility of other flying devices or intelligent beings visiting the planet either from the oceanic bottoms or deeper areas or from other areas in space. But I am positive that we have the technology, I can even name the companies and people involved, in making high-speed electric aircraft that do look, strange enough, like a saucer.
I'd like to ask you a direct question. You work in the field of anti-gravitics. Could you make what we call a flying saucer?
Oh, yes, with adequate funds and time, sure. I'd still be doing it for the research organizations if I hadn't differed in philosophy. That's where I got in trouble, because I stood up and said, why are you doing this? And it wasn't for me to know. UFOs, if they don't exist, or these electric flying saucers, if they don't exist in our current technology, I'll give it to the world. I'll be a hero, but I'll tell you right now, I don't need to do that. It's already done.
It's already done.
We have theory now, but I don't think any practical devices that would allow us to go faster than the speed of light and traverse many light years of distance in a very, very short time, using the same technique that we used to break the sound barrier, where we warp the shock wave.
We do.
On tops of the decks of ships that shoot smoke rings or charged particle rings like smoke rings at targets long distances away and strike them with enough force to electrocute or burn the target, depending upon what frequencies are used.
Richard Eskridge worked on both the weapons and the propulsion.
A way to use this process to control minds at a distance of 10 to 15 miles from a central transmitter, where people aren't even aware of it during their sleep, somewhat like post-hypnotic suggestion. This, in the wrong hands, is not a good tool.
That is an understatement. It is not a good tool.
In natural law, there's only one law, and that's you either know or you don't know. There's no guesswork. It's like, you know when you're hungry, you know when you want to sleep, you know when you want to go to the restroom. These are knowing. These are all natural knowingness. It has a great deal of difference from the synthetic or invented system of guesswork, of belief, if you will. You can believe this, but somebody can come along and get you to disbelieve it, and vice versa. So you go around and around and around all your life sometimes for some people, and never seem to get anywhere until you stand up and look into natural law, which is either you know or you don't know. And if you don't know, then you proceed along a line that's comfortable for you. You proceed into the subject matter that you're studying, and you don't give up until you know what it is. There's no more guesswork. And you don't have to try to do this, because if you're following natural law, it will come to you. All you have to do is start it. The first step is just, I want to learn this, I want to know this. And just start it, and pretty soon it will start teaching you.
This might look like a radio-controlled bee, but it's actually a bee with a little radar transponder on it, which means that we can track this bee as it flies around the field. And these little guys can carry 90% of their body weight in pollen, so it won't affect the way it flies.
I was in physics class, and the teacher was saying, bumblebees can't fly. It's impossible. They can't, aerodynamically, they can't fly. And I was on the second floor of the classroom, and I looked out the window, and there was a big, beautiful bumblebee staring at me right in the eye. And he was standing there doing something that this guy said he couldn't do.
First of all, the bees are flying much faster than predicted, an incredible 30 miles an hour. even when fully laden. The next surprise is where the bees go. They almost always overfly potentially decent food. And once they've found their patch, they then repeatedly shuttle to and from it. And this is the really clever bit. In spite of 30-mile-an-hour crosswinds, whether out or back, they all fly in dead straight lines.
I ran into a person. His name was Arthur Aho. What Aho explained to me was that, and he told me about the Heisenberg principle, that anything you look at, you are vibrating energy. You are radiating out of these eyes. You're radiating energy. You're a live being. And everything you're looking at, you're changing right in front of your eyes. You don't realize it consciously, but that's what's happening. So you're never going to get to the absolute, because the energy it takes to measure something also changes it. So I said, okay, well, what's that got to do with the bumblebee and the teacher? He said, well, he was right. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, he said a bumblebee can't fly aerodynamically. Yeah. And he's right. And I said, well, what did bumblebees do? And they said, well, they levitate. And I said, well, how's that? And he says, come on, I'll show you. And he showed me. He wrote a book, incidentally. I don't know if it's still in print. It's in the Library of Congress. The book is called Tomorrow's Energy Need Not Be Fuel. And in that book, he gave reference to what I'm talking about, that that of levitation, that the bumblebee, when he starts to beat his wings, when he starts to flap his wings, there's a little cavity, a hollow cavity next to the larynx inside his system that's hollow. And when he beats his wings, he starts to resonate this energy, and it goes back and forth, just similar to a guitar strumming on one side of the room and hitting the same chord on the other side of the room, or somebody hitting a high C and breaking a crystal. It's the same thing. It's resonance. And he said, what they do, they resonate. And when they resonate, they eventually reach the resonance of the field around them. And he explained it this way to me, that the Earth was, of course, spinning, but it was operating on a frequency of 8.5 hertz per second or so forth. And he says, once this bumblebee hits that resonant frequency of its surroundings, it becomes a free agent. It creates a magnetic bubble around itself, and it can go anywhere it wants. And I said, well, that's not in any of the science books. He said, I know. And you probably never see it there either, but that's what happens. They'll discover it someday and bring it out, but it's just we have a conventional way of doing things, and then we have a natural way of doing things, and they're totally different. They're diametrically opposed in many, many cases.
The important point here is the bees. As you've heard, the bumblebee shouldn't really be able to fly. Those wings are way too small to lift that chubby little body off the ground. In fact, it's a bit of a conundrum also for the mainstream scientists. They can travel in perfectly straight lines for long distances without any deviation, even during a howling crosswind. Because of the resonant frequencies produced by the vibration of their wings, they create a bubble in the ether, protecting them from any outside interference.
So, what I said today was that in the case of bumblebees, if I can find it, did I say with bumblebees? I said with bumblebees, I don't know whether I got it. Basically, bumblebees have wings that are made of chitin. The chitin has little hairs on them. The hairs are piezoelectric. The chitin is piezoelectric. It produces a space charge at the tip, and the tip then produces exotic vacuum objects. What did I say about the ARV? You have a Tesla coil potentially, but even without it, it probably still would occur. but they would produce charge clusters. They might accelerate the charge clusters, and it's throwing out charge clusters. In both cases, nature is the cause of the effect. In the Bumblebee, it's produced naturally, and in the case of the ARV. In both of these cases, in the white world, I believe these are completely original suggestions for how these particular devices may function. The same is true of Lytra on a beetle, as per Grebennikov. I have a lot of them here. I have prepared quite a body of work. It's a little bit more interesting for beetles, and I will go into that in a separate presentation. But in both cases, it is making the charge clusters available for the ARV and the B to work. And what I showed is the normal debunking of the Bumblebee's ability to produce this bubble around itself, where it's able to fly at 30 miles an hour in a 30-mile-an-hour crosswind, just like the water cavitation bubbles in Suhas Raukal's lab was able to go quickly against the flow or direction of movement of the water. It's like its own little world. Just like Tesla said in 1911, the application of this principle will be able to make a device of any shape, any weight, be able to fly at fantastic speeds in any weather without any control surfaces or screw propellers or those kind of propulsion devices. Very clear that that was known back then, that the principle would do that. And so you have a situation where it is magnetohydrodynamics. Magnetohydrodynamics allows you to change the vacuum, which allows you to go and break the laws within our normal space-time. And we then can listen to Hal Puthoff say his bit on this subject.
Well, what does a physicist and engineer mean by the speed of light? He means this little equation here, with speed of light is given by 1 over the square root of the permittivity times the permeability of the vacuum. So the point is, if you re-engineer those vacuum parameters, then you can make the effective speed of light higher in the engineered region. And so those are the solution in general relativity that are called wormholes. And again, it's not science fiction. This is just right off the shelf, standard textbook general relativity applications. So what that means is a reduced time interstellar travel is not, as skeptics would say, you can't get from there to here. Advanced ET civilizations now, or ourselves in the future, is not fundamentally constrained by physical principles. The exotic physics for such can be addressed in engineering terms, so metric engineering, as it were. And that helped us understand some of the aspects. I mean, you may have heard the phrase, dense stars, you get redshift. Well, it turns out in this engineered technology, you get so-called blue shift. That is, frequencies are upshifted to higher frequencies. So, for example, in this room, most of the radiation coming off our bodies, off the walls, and so on, is in fact in the infrared. But we see things in the visible range. But what happens if you get into a volume of space where the vacuum has been engineered in the way I've been discussing? It turns out you get a blue shift. So in fact, the infrared that you don't ordinarily see can get blue shifted up into the visible, so it's not surprising that all these craft should be so luminous. Now, the downside from all of this is the fact that visible light, which doesn't have any particularly harmful effects, gets blue shifted up into the ultraviolet, so you get too close to a landed craft, you might get a sunburn, or off into the soft X-ray region, so the chance of radiation poisoning. So if you run across one of these sitting on the ground, I would recommend you don't, and it's powered up, I'd recommend you don't rush up.
So the change space-time metric for the B is caused by the charge clusters emitted from the wings and the vortex produced by one wing and the anti-vortex produced by the other. This is what we know. The same thing can be done on the ARV, and when that spins up, when it's at a low level, nothing's, you're just getting some thermal energy stripped from the room, as was observed by during the Hutchison effect, that thermal energy is slightly upshifted, and that is helping the device stay aloft. But when you spin it up, it starts to blue shift those things up as the permittivity of the vacuum changes and speed of light changes. You're doing vacuum metric changes. Ultimately, it's focused as a beam through the center, and the gravitational wave will come out through the top, and that will effectively drive up. And as your fractal toroid is spinning on one side more than another, or you're only using 6 or 8 or whatever, that is when it's spinning only a little bit. But when you might want to have it so that when you're just got it on the ground, you just got a couple of them spinning, and you have the walkway coming in, so it's not going into those particular ether vortices. But when you spin it up with more of these things, and you have a higher current so that it's spinning even faster, then it'll start to build the bubble around it, and that'll eventually look like a sphere in the sky, and it'll go all the way through, take the visible light all the way through to UV and X-rays, and ultimately you'll disappear because you'll go away so quickly. Okay, and we must again say I'm very sorry for the loss of Mark McCandlish and Amy Estridge. Apparently both handgun shots to the head within a couple of months of each other. I had communications with both of these people before that occurred. I can say that I do not own any form of guns. I stay away from any risks I can, and I really love my life and my family, and I love you guys as well. And I'd like to say thank you very much for those that have helped out with this process so far. This has been a community effort, and we are at the point right now where, as I didn't know this was going to be said by a video that I didn't know was going to be published and made available. But if you recall, my O-Day today, actually, if I go there today, the actual says this: you will know that the thing that drives the so-called cold fusion energy will also give us a fantastic means of propulsion. And it's about knowing you know. It's knowing for certain that this is the technology that does it. And you can, hopefully by now, you can see the obfuscation and the limited hangouts and the, oh, we're in 2009, we still don't know that this toroid is actually a toroid of toroids. We don't know that, even though it was in the 1980 paper by Bostic. We don't know, even though that in 1948, he literally started by making a torus and firing it to another torus, loop, anti-loop, and they came together. It was a torus, a tori, in 1948, but somehow in 2009, we still think it's just one torus, because we're not that bright. We're just not that bright. All of that money that we've had out of your pockets since 1948, all of that money, we were just, I don't know, just not that bright. I'm sorry, we're just not that bright. Yeah? No, it's been done. Doesn't matter if I do it, but it does matter that we gain access to this, because we are living a lie. It's nonsense, and we can't wait on them, because you can see what's going on. They've had 2 years of this revelations in Congress, and what they're revealing is already in the 1979 AC whole intergalactic transport paper. It's already in there. I already saw in 1979 the little glowy balls in the sky. Stop it with the rubbish. Stop it. It's not aliens. If it is aliens, then so what? Because we've already got it. We've already done it. Stop it. Stop it with the nonsense. Come clean. It's going to happen. There is already a party out there that knows how to do this. Okay? All right. And they're not in the black world. Okay? So, can we stop it with the theatre? Stop it with the theatre. It's not interesting anymore. Stop it with the alien invasion. Stop it. People are dying over nothing. They've been dying for the best part of the last century or more over nothing. We solved it. My name's Bob Greenyer. I'm a volunteer with the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project. Thank you for joining me this 1st of December 2024 for O-Day. Alien Gravity.